Chapter 1761. In the next 10 days, shocking news swept through the entire Mystical Sky Mansion's Heaven Palace and the entire Mystical Sky Mansion. The true origin in Ling Tian's body and the territory that he mastered are identical to Li Feng, who had appeared during the Rising Sky ranking battle in the Rising Sky Mansion's district. Not only that, Li Feng's actually his senior brother. He has broken through to the Divine Saint stage and has gone to the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint land. The news spread like a wildfire in the Mystical Sky Mansion. Everyone who was not in closed-door cultivation was shocked by it. Later on, people began to doubt the credibility of the news. However, with the testimonies from the Sky Hurdle Mansion and Raging Wave Mansion's disciples, they soon obtained a confirmed answer. The Mystical Sky Mansion broke into a commotion immediately. Did you hear? Ling Tian is actually Li Feng's junior brother. Is it true? Of course, it's true. The entire mansion is talking about it now. No wonder such a monster like Li Feng and Ling Tian appeared one after another in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint land in just a few years. As it turned out, they're disciples of the same master. Moreover, I heard that Ling Tian and Li Feng's master is actually a powerhouse from the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint land. The reason Li Feng went to the upper province is to search for his master. Ling Tian will eventually go to the upper province as well to look for his master. What? Ling Tian already has a master? Such discussions could be heard in the Mystical Sky Mansion. Ling Tian is actually Li Feng's junior brother. After learning about the news, Wang Feizan instantly went to look for Duan Ling Tian. However, she discovered he was in closed-door cultivation at the moment. She had no choice but to suppress her curiosity for now. She turned around and left. I guess I can only ask him when the Saint Martial Secret Zone is open. Junior brother Ling Tian is actually Li Feng's junior brother. Wang Pai was greatly astonished. Ling Tian already has a master. Xiao Yi, the vice palace master of the Heaven Palace, frowned. He knew the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion had the intention of taking Duan Ling Tian as his last disciple. However, once this news spread out, the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion might dismiss the idea. After all, the reason the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion wanted to take Ling Tian as his disciple was because he hoped Ling Tian would strengthen the Mystical Sky Mansion and work for the good of Mystical Sky Mansion. However, they learned that Ling Tian would head to the upper province to look for his master like Li Feng. Due to this reason, there was no reason for Ling Tian to stay in the Mystical Sky Mansion and lead it to glory. Moreover, the mansion master would probably take into account that Ling Tian already had a master, and his master was a powerhouse from the upper province on top of that. Under these circumstances, he would most likely not take Ling Tian as his direct disciple, let alone his last disciple. What a pity, he's such a rare genius. Xiao Yi sighed. Xiao Yi found this pitiful, but someone was beside themselves with joy. Father, did you hear? Ling Tian is actually Li Feng's junior brother. Moreover, he already has a master from the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint land. It seems like Lord Mansion Master won't be taking him as a disciple anymore. After Zhao Ji heard the news, he immediately went to look for his father, Zhao Dang. I can't believe this Ling Tian actually has a master from upper province of the Dao Martial Saint land. His master must be terrifyingly strong. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been possible for him to nurture two geniuses at the same time. Zhao Dang sighed emotionally. So what if his master is a powerhouse from the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint land? As long as we cover our tracks properly, his master won't ever find out. Zhao Ji snarled as killing intent flashed across his eyes. Indeed, Zhao Dang nodded. After the Rising Sky Mansion's matter is dealt with, I'll arrange for Ling Tian to be killed. At that time, we'll make it seem as though he has gone missing. Nobody would carry out a thorough investigation for someone who's not truly loyal to our Mystical Sky Mansion, after all, no matter how high his innate talent is. At that time, even if his master leaves the upper province and comes to the lower province, a long time would have passed. Even if his master wants to investigate, he won't find a single clue at all. Zhao Ji smiled sinisterly. Naturally, Duan Ling Tian was unaware of the commotion in the Mystical Sky Mansion and the evil plans of the Zhao father and son. Duan Ling Tian finally left the third level of the Seven Treasures Exquisite Pagoda and returned to his room on the day the Saint Martial Secret Zone was going to open. He opened his door and walked out. You finally came out of your closed-door cultivation. As soon as Duan Ling Tian walked out, a familiar voice entered his ear. Without looking, he knew it was Wang Feizan. So early? Duan Ling Tian looked at Wang Feizan and smiled as he greeted her. Wang Feizan looked at the morning sun that had just risen by the horizon as she answered Duan Lingtian, it's no longer early. The sun has risen a long time ago. Oh, yeah. Suddenly, her expression turned solemn as her eyes gleamed. There's news that's spreading around in the mystical sky mansion recently, and it has caused a commotion. Rumor has it that you're Li Feng's junior brother. Moreover, you have a master in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Is it true? That's right. When Duan Lingtian heard her words, he nodded. Why aren't you surprised? Don't tell me you already knew about the news spreading in the mystical sky mansion. Weren't you in closed-door cultivation during these 10 days? Wang Feizan was puzzled. Duan Lingtian shrugged as he answered nonchalantly, I didn't know this news has already spread out in the mystical sky mansion, but since somebody has found out, it's only a matter of time before it comes out anyway. The other day, he had told Ren Fei this because he wanted him to spread this piece of news. He had done this because he did not want the mansion master of the mystical sky mansion to ask him to be his disciple. Not only that, but he also wanted the mansion master of mystical sky mansion to know that he would not stay long in the mystical sky mansion. He would eventually leave and head to the upper province to look for the master he made up. Naturally, the matter of his master was fake, but it was true he intended to go to the upper province. Instead of going there to look for his master, he was going to look for his fiancée, Ka, and their child. How can you remain so calm? Aren't you the least bit upset? When Wang Feizan saw the calm expression on Duan Lingtian's face, she was even more puzzled. Why would I be upset? Duan Lingtian asked, confused. When Wang Feizan heard his words, she was so exasperated that she stomped her feet. Didn't you know that prior to this, many people were saying after we come out from the Saint Martial secret zone, the Lord Mansion Master would most likely take you as his direct disciple or his last disciple? So, Duan Lingtian asked again. Don't you know that once news of you having a master and will eventually leave for the upper province will affect the Lord Mansion Master's decision? Perhaps, he wanted to take you as his direct disciple or last disciple. He might even want you to be the next Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion. However, since this news has spread out, he'll definitely dismiss the idea. When Wang Feizan saw that Duan Lingtian was still wearing the nonchalant expression after she finished speaking, she was rendered speechless. Don't you even feel slightly regretful? There's nothing to regret. Duan Lingtian shook his head. This news is true. Even if it didn't spread out now, it'll even eventually come out as well. At that time, I'm afraid things might get quite messy if the mansion master has already taken me as his direct disciple. After hearing Duan Lingtian's words, Wang Feizan fell silent. After a long while, she stared at Duan Lingtian with her bright eyes as though she was staring at a monster. What are you looking at? Duan Lingtian frowned. He was not used to being stared at like that, and he found it uncomfortable as well. I'm just trying to figure you out. To think you don't want to be the direct disciple of the awe-inspiring mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion. Wang Feizan answered. Didn't you say that I have a master in the upper province? Don't tell me you think my master is inferior to the mansion master. Duan Lingtian asked with a shrug. Wang Feizan had no words to refute Duan Lingtian's words. Although she did not know just how powerful Duan Lingtian's master was, just from the fact that he was able to nurture two geniuses as his disciples meant he was not an ordinary person. At the very least, he was much stronger than the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion in terms of nurturing disciples. After Wang Feizan recalled the main topic at hand, she quickly said, all right, let's drop this topic. It's time for us to gather with the others at the summit. Let's go. Duan Lingtian nodded in reply before heading to the Heaven Palace's summit with Wang Feizan. When they arrived at the summit, Duan Lingtian noticed that he and Wang Feizan were quite late as the other 8 people had already arrived. Lingtian. After Duan Lingtian appeared, Zhao Ji, who was among the 8 people, instantly shifted his gaze to Duan Lingtian. His gaze was cold. One could see the hatred in his eyes. Duan Lingtian, naturally, noticed Zhao Ji's hate-filled gaze, but he just ignored it. Whether it was then or now, he had never taken Zhao Ji seriously. In his opinion, Zhao Ji could only glare at him at the most. Zhao Ji would have stepped out to fight Duan Lingtian even if he knew he was no match for him if he knew what Duan Lingtian was thinking. On the summit, apart from the 10 Heaven Palace's disciples who were qualified to enter the Saint Martial secret zone, there were many people there as well. These people were all of Heaven Palace's disciples. Whoosh, whoosh. Without warning, two sounds of wind whistling in the air sounded from afar. A few moments later, two familiar figures appeared before Duan Lingtian and the others. They were none other than Xiao Yi and Wang Pai. After the two of them appeared, they shifted their eyes to the other side of the sky in unison. "Welcome, Lord Palace Master." Then, Xiao Yi and Wang Pai bowed in unison in that direction. Both of their tones were filled with respect. "Welcome, Lord Palace Master." At this moment, the people present on the scene also began to realize what was going on and bowed in that direction one after another. The Palace Master of Heaven Palace. Duan Lingtian raised a brow as he looked at the distant sky. Although he had been at the Heaven Palace for quite some time, he had not met the Palace Master of Heaven Palace before. Chapter 1762. Under Duan Lingtian's watchful eyes, a figure finally appeared high in the sky. The Palace Master of Heaven Palace was an old man with a medium build. Apart from his white eyebrows, he had a tuft of goatee as well. He had a kind face, but his eyes gleamed knowingly as though he was not as simple as he seemed to be. The Palace Master of Heaven Palace, dressed in a long grey robe, stood still as the breeze brushed past him. However, his robe remained still. "You're Lingtian." Under the watchful gaze of the others, the Palace Master of Heaven Palace looked at Duan Lingtian. His bright eyes contained a hint of warmth as he looked at him. "Palace Master." Duan Lingtian nodded slightly. "Not bad." The Palace Master of Heaven Palace nodded as a slight smile appeared on his face. Then, he looked away before he calmly announced, "Since everyone's here, let's make our move." At once, under the guidance of the Palace Master of Heaven Palace, Vice Palace Master Xiao Yi, and his disciple, Wang Pai, Duan Lingtian, and the others followed closely behind Xiao Yi and Wang Pai as they headed toward the main mansion. The entrance of the mystical Sky Mansion's St. Martial's secret zone was in the main mansion. Looks like Lord Palace Master has high regard for Lingtian as well. That's right, there are so many Heaven Palace's disciples, but he only greeted Lingtian. He didn't even bother with the others, including Zhao Ji. As expected from the strongest person among the younger generation in our mystical Sky Mansion. He's indeed extraordinary. Not only those Heaven Palace's disciples who came to watch the fun on the Heaven Palace's summit were whispering among themselves, but many of those Heaven Palace's disciples who were also heading to the main mansion were also whispering among themselves. When the others heard the discussion, they were unaffected. However, Zhao Ji's expression had turned grim. He, Zhao Ji, was the son of the Vice Palace Master of Mystical Sky Mansion after all. His grandfather was one of the two great guardians of the Mystical Sky Mansion. If it was before, everyone's eyes would be on him since he was the special and privileged one. However, after Duan Lingtian had appeared, he had become someone that everybody ignored. For someone as prideful as he was, this was completely unacceptable. Due to this reason, when Zhao Ji looked at Duan Lingtian, the hatred in his eyes intensified. Although Duan Lingtian did not bother with Zhao Ji's gaze, he could still sense it. To him, the current Zhao Ji was just like a crazy dog by the roadside that would bite people at random. He would not stoop so low as to get even with a crazy dog. It was fortunate Zhao Ji was unaware of Duan Lingtian's thoughts. Otherwise, he would be so furious he would probably throw up 3 liters of blood. Under the guidance of the Palace Master of Heaven Palace, Duan Lingtian and the others arrived at a vast space behind the main mansion. When they arrived, they saw a group of people who had arrived earlier. Duan Lingtian had some impression of the person standing behind the person at the lead. It was none other than the Vice Palace Master of Yellow Palace. "Senior Brother Zhu, your Heaven Palace is here early." There was no need to guess the identity of the person in the lead. One could easily tell it was the Palace Master of the Yellow Palace. When he saw the group of people from Heaven Palace, he took the initiative to greet them first. The person whom he greeted was none other than Zhu Luqi, the Palace Master of Heaven Palace. "Junior Brother Qian, your Yellow Palace is even earlier than us." Faced with Qian Pingsheng, the Palace Master of Yellow Palace, Zhu Luqi smiled nonchalantly. "This must be Lingtian, right? I've long heard about you, and now that I finally meet you, I have to say you're indeed a man with a striking appearance." Soon after, Qian Pingsheng shifted his attention to Duan Lingtian. Although he had not seen Duan Lingtian before, the Vice Palace Master standing behind him had seen Duan Lingtian before. He could easily tell who Lingtian was from the Vice Palace Master. "Thank you for your compliment, Palace Master Qian." The other party was the Palace Master of Yellow Palace after all. Due to this reason, Duan Lingtian was courteous and smiled in response. When Zhao Ji saw this, he was so jealous that his eyes turned bloodshot immediately. At any rate, he, Zhao Ji, was the son of the vice palace master and the grandson of the guardian. However, the palace master of Yellow Palace seemed as though he did not notice him at all. Instead, he was paying attention to a country boy who had appeared out of nowhere. Although Zhao Ji was angry at the palace master of Yellow Palace's action, he cast all his anger Duan Lingtian instead. Not only was the palace master of Yellow Palace the leader of one of the palaces in the mystical sky mansion, but he was also a vice mansion master as well. He was in no way inferior to his father in terms of position. Not only that, but his father's position was actually much more inferior if one were to get into it. In the mystical sky mansion, the 4 palace masters of the heaven, earth, mystical, and yellow palaces were also the vice mansion masters. Apart from protecting the mystical sky mansion, they had to shoulder the responsibility of managing the 4 palaces. The 4 palaces were the foundation of the mystical sky mansion, so mishap was not allowed. Due to this reason, these responsibilities were given to the 4 vice mansion masters who were the most capable and powerful. These 4 palace masters were people in the same generation as Zhao Ji's grandfather. Although they were not as powerful as Zhao Ji's grandfather, they were still more powerful than Zhao Ji's father. Among the 4 palaces' palace masters, Zhu Luqi, the palace master of Heaven Palace, was the most capable and powerful. In the mystical sky mansion, Zhu Luqi was also widely acknowledged as the 4th most powerful person in the mystical sky mansion. His prowess was only inferior to the mansion master and the 2 great guardians. How famous of you, to think that even the palace master of Yellow Palace would take the initiative to greet you. Wang Feizan's voice resonated in Duan Lingtian's ears. If it was before, Wang Feizan's tone would have been sour when she said such words. However, currently, she was sincerely happy for Duan Lingtian. 10 days ago, on the summit of Heaven Palace, Duan Lingtian was like her guardian angel as he shielded her when faced with the 2 eminent saint stage powerhouses. At that moment, Duan Lingtian's action had also touched the softest spot in the depth of her heart. Nobody had ever touched that place before. Duan Lingtian was the first person to touch that place. Perhaps, he might be the only man she meets that would touch that place in her heart. Lingtian, one day, I'll definitely enter your heart and become your woman. Although Wang Feizan was a straightforward woman, her beautiful and delicate cheeks could not help but turn red when this thought appeared in her mind. Naturally, Duan Lingtian was unaware of all of this. He merely treated Wang Feizan as a friend. Soon after, people from the earth and mystical palaces had also arrived one after another, and the 2 people in the lead were clearly the palace masters of the Earth Palace and Mystical Palace. After they arrived, they greeted the palace masters of Heaven Palace and Yellow Palace before they looked at Duan Lingtian curiously. They were curious about this Lingtian, who was widely acknowledged as the strongest person among the younger generation in the Mystical Sky Mansion not long after he entered the Mystical Sky Mansion. Now that they had seen the person in real life, they could not help but muse why such an extraordinary genius did not enter their palaces. Seeing how the palace masters from Earth Palace and Mystical Palace were also eager to greet Duan Lingtian, Zhao Ji was so furious that his body began to tremble. It felt as though his heart was about to burst. There's exactly 30 people. Duan Lingtian glanced at the Earth, Mystical, and Yellow Palaces groups and saw there was a total of 20 saint stage disciples from the 3 palaces. Adding the 10 people from Heaven Palace, there were exactly 30 people. At this moment, the other saint stage disciples from the other 3 palaces also sized Duan Lingtian up. There was a variety of expressions on these people's faces. Some of them were wary, some were jealous and envious. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As the 4 palaces' palace masters turned around in unison to look at the distant sky, Duan Lingtian and the others turned to look as well. The distant sky was calm and tranquil initially. However, after a few moments, the clouds began to churn. In the end, several figures emerged from it. One person was walking in the lead while 4 people followed behind him. The person in the lead was wearing a long white robe that was edged in gold. He was a middle-aged man whose complexion was as clear as jade. As he flew toward them, the air in the surroundings seemed to tremble. With every step he took, it seemed as though he was walking on a road that only belonged to him. Apart from that, his body exuded a peerless, dignified and majestic aura. This aura was much stronger compared to the 4 palace masters. His appearance was similar to a king walking up to his throne. There was no need for an introduction or explanation. Duan Lingtian and some others who had not seen this middle-aged man before could guess his identity. He was the mansion master of mystical sky mansion, Meng Qing. As the leader of a quasi-third-rate force, Meng Qing's fame was widely spread in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Before Duan Lingtian came to the mystical sky mansion, he had already heard of him and knew he was an elite powerhouse in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. He was so strong that he was only inferior to the leader of the Mountainshade Black Market and the mansion master of Azure Cloud Mansion. Such a person would be able to make the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land quake with just a stomp of his feet. For this reason, Duan Lingtian put away his playful attitude and put on a solemn expression. However, when he saw one of the four people behind Meng Qing, he could not help but feel stunned. Senior brother Ji Yu Li. Why is he here? Moreover, he even came with Lord Mansion Master. Duan Lingtian had long noticed although the surrounding was vast, he did not see anyone else. He could tell this place was restricted, and most people were not allowed here. Otherwise, there would be a lot of people who would come to watch the show. He did not think he would be able to see Ji Yu Li here. It did not even cross his mind that Ji Yu Li would come with Mansion Master Meng Qing. Junior brother Lingtian. At this moment, Ji Yu Li's voice transmission resonated in his ears in a timely manner. Senior brother Ji Yu Li, why are you here? Moreover, you even came with the Mansion Master, Duan Lingtian asked through voice transmission, slightly stunned. Ji Yu Li replied through voice transmission, in fact, this is all thanks to you. Me, Duan Lingtian was confused. It was because of your speculation about Xu Jing, the young mansion master of the Rising Sky Mansion, and your permission for me to report it to the mansion master that he allowed me to come and watch the show on the day of the opening of the Saint Martial Secret Zone, Ji Yu Li replied through voice transmission. No wonder. Duan Lingtian finally understood. At this moment, Duan Lingtian discovered that one of the three men following behind Mansion Master Meng Qing was staring at him with a hostile gaze. Chapter 1763. With just a glance, Duan Lingtian could easily guess the identity of the middle-aged who was staring at him with a hostile gaze. It was the Vice Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion, Zhao Dang. He was also Zhao Ji's father. Duan Lingtian could easily guess his identity because this man's eyes resembled Zhao Ji's eyes up to 60 to 70%. It was impossible for him not to be able to identify this person. Now that he knew this person's identity, he no longer found the hostile gaze strange. He and Zhao Ji were as incompatible as water and fire. It was only natural for Zhao Dang to regard him as an eyesore. As for the other two middle-aged men, Duan Lingtian could also guess their identities. They must be the two other external affairs vice mansion masters other than Zhao Dang. There was a total of 9 vice mansion masters in the mystical sky mansion. Other than the 4 vice mansion masters who were also the palace masters of heaven, earth, mystical, and yellow palace, there were another 5 vice mansion masters who were in charge of the external affairs of mystical sky mansion. They were usually stationed outside and would occasionally take turns to return to the mystical sky mansion for some time off while guarding the main mansion as well. Zhao Dang was one of them. Lord Mansion Master. Soon after, Zhu Luqi, the Palace Master of Heaven Palace, bowed at Mansion Master Meng Qing politely as everyone followed his lead. Some saint stage disciples, in particular, were so excited that their bodies began to tremble when they learned the middle-aged man before them was the Mansion Master of the Mystical Sky Mansion. They did not regain their senses for a long time. Duan Lingtian, on the other hand, appeared particularly calm although this was his first time seeing Mansion Master Meng Qing. All right. Faced with everyone's greeting, Meng Qing nodded his head nonchalantly before shifting his gaze to Zhu Luqi. To be exact, his eyes were on Zhu Luqi and the group of Heaven Palace's people. After a while, Meng Qing asked, "Who's Lingtian?" The moment he spoke, he asked for Duan Lingtian immediately. Everyone's eyes instantly shifted to Duan Lingtian as though they were trying to tell Meng Qing this person was the one he was looking for. Mansion Master. Duan Lingtian stepped out and nodded his head at Meng Qing as a greeting. When he met Zhu Luqi earlier, he had addressed him as Palace Master. Now that he had met Meng Qing, he had also directly addressed him as Mansion Master. This was a habit of his. In his heart, everyone he met was someone he wanted to surpass. Due to this reason, it was difficult for him to address them politely using titles like Lord when faced with these kinds of people. Without warning, Zhao Dang who was standing behind Meng Qing glared at Duan Lingtian sharply as he shouted, "How dare you!" If looks could kill, Duan Lingtian would have been dead. "Lingtian, how dare you address Lord Mansion Master by just Mansion Master?" Are you really this rude? Zhao Deng finally found an opportunity to make things difficult for Duan Lingtian in a just way. Naturally, he would not let this opportunity go. Or could it be you think nothing of our Lord Mansion Master, Lingtian? As soon as Zhao Deng's words left his mouth, the entire place was in an uproar. Many people felt that Zhao Deng was only looking for trouble with Duan Lingtian, but equally as many people felt he was right as well. It was indeed inappropriate for Duan Lingtian to address Lord Mansion Master as only Mansion Master. Vice Mansion Master Zhao Deng is Zhao Ji's father. It won't look good for him if he intentionally makes things difficult for Lingtian. However, now that he has obtained such a good chance, I'm afraid he won't let things go. This could be considered as using the public to avenge his personal matter, right? Not really. After all, it's indeed inappropriate for Lingtian to address Lord Mansion Master as Mansion Master so casually. That's right, Lord Mansion Master is our mystical Sky Mansion's leader, and it's indeed disrespectful for Lingtian to directly address him as Mansion Master. No matter which way the whispering went, many people looked at Duan Lingtian with a pitiful gaze since Zhao Deng's words were justified. Nobody could refute him since it would also be considered as disrespecting the Lord Mansion Master. This fellow, junior brother Lingtian, Wang Feizan and Wang Pai broke out into cold sweat on behalf of Duan Lingtian since he was in a disadvantageous situation. Zhao Deng had taken control of the situation by striking first, earning him the upper hand. Moreover, he had done so in front of the Lord Mansion Master. Indeed, it seemed like Duan Lingtian's situation did not look too promising. Ji Yuli, who was panicking, quickly defended Duan Lingtian. Lord Mansion Master, junior brother Lingtian's definitely not like what Vice Mansion Master Zhao has just described. Humph. Before Meng Qing, the Mansion Master of the mystical Sky Mansion, could speak, Zhao Deng snorted coldly. Ji Yuli, I know you're close to Lingtian, but you've crossed the line by defending him. Don't tell me you're the one who taught him to be this disrespectful to Lord Mansion Master. Zhao Deng ruthlessly dragged Ji Yuli into this matter with his words. Ji Yuli was so infuriated that his expression turned grim immediately as killing intent gleamed in his eyes. Oh, wow, I look down on the Mansion Master, huh? How slanderous. At this moment, Duan Lingtian finally spoke and smiled at Zhao Deng mockingly. He continued saying at a speed that was neither hurried nor slow, "You're Vice Mansion Master Zhao, right? Let me ask you a question, are there any rules in the mystical Sky Mansion that state we're not allowed to address Mansion Master as Mansion Master, and we must address him as Lord Mansion Master when we see him?" Humph, even if there's no such rule, addressing Lord Mansion Master by Lord is a matter of course. That's the most basic etiquette. You addressing Lord Mansion Master as Mansion Master shows that you have no respect for him, Zhao Deng replied aggressively after he snorted. Vice Mansion Master Zhao, you keep saying that I think nothing of Mansion Master, so let me tell you this today, I do indeed think nothing of the Mansion Master. Duan Lingtian said wantonly as he laughed out loud. Silence. The moment these words left Duan Lingtian's mouth, the entire scene fell silent. Only Duan Lingtian's laughter could be heard. Apart from Meng Qing, the Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion, everyone, including Zhao Deng, was dumbstruck. Nobody expected him to say such words. Meng Qing looked at Duan Lingtian quietly without any changes in his expression. Nobody knew what he was thinking at all. What's he trying to do? Wang Feizan was horrified. She was so anxious that she felt as though her heart was going to stop beating. Junior brother Lingtian, colors drained from Ji Yuli's face. It did not cross his mind that his junior brother would be so audacious. To think he actually dared to say that he thought nothing of the Mansion Master. Was he not just placing himself right in front of a nozzle of a gun? Based on his opinion, Duan Lingtian's action was no different from committing suicide. Even the palace masters of the Heaven, Earth, Mystical, and Yellow Palaces and their respective vice palace masters could not help but frown. They were baffled as to why Duan Lingtian would say such treacherous words. After all, Duan Lingtian did not seem like a reckless person. Treason, treason. At this moment, Zhao Deng had finally regained his senses. Initially, he had thought Duan Lingtian would refute his claims, but he did not expect him to actually cooperate with him as though he could not wait to die. Lingtian, you're no longer qualified to remain in the mystical Sky Mansion for committing high treason to Lord Mansion Master, Zhao Deng said passionately as he looked at Duan Lingtian as he was burned with righteousness. Duan Lingtian interrupted Zhao Deng and said with a mocking smile, Vice Mansion Master Zhao, I don't think it's up to you to decide whether I'm qualified to remain in the mystical Sky Mansion, right? Besides, I haven't finished my sentence, and yet, you're in such a hurry to jump to a conclusion saying I committed high treason. Isn't your decision a little hasty? You've already said you think nothing of Lord Mansion Master. Don't tell me you think you'll still be able to remain in the mystical Sky Mansion. Zhao Deng smirked. I just said that I've not finished my sentence. Duan Lingtian glanced indifferently at Zhao Deng before he looked directly at the person in question, Meng Qing. He said solemnly, I do indeed think nothing of Mansion Master since I keep you in my heart. Otherwise, I wouldn't have provided such important information to you, Lord Mansion Master. When Duan Lingtian reached the end of his sentence, he looked at Meng Qing with a smile. You're twisting your words. When Zhao Deng heard his words, his expression turned extremely grim. It did not cross his mind that Duan Lingtian would bring up the matter about the rising Sky Mansion. He felt unwilling because he knew Duan Lingtian had won in this matter. Enough, stop arguing. Just as Zhao Deng had expected, after hearing Duan Lingtian's words, the Mansion Master personally stopped the argument. Moreover, he even continued to say, the way of addressing is merely a formality. Some people address me with the title, Lord, but I don't see how respectful they are. On the other hand, some people don't address me with the title, Lord, but I can tell they treat me better than most people. Based on Meng Qing's words, it was obvious he had acknowledged Duan Lingtian's words. At the same time, it seemed to have given Zhao Deng a sound slap. Damn it! Originally, Zhao Ji thought his father would be able to expel Duan Lingtian from the mystical Sky Mansion by making things difficult for him. However, who would have thought Duan Lingtian would mention the matter about the rising Sky Mansion? He knew how important that matter was to the mystical Sky Mansion. It was a meritorious deed. With this meritorious deed, Lord Mansion Master would never allow his father to expel Lingtian. Although he knew this very well, his heart was still filled with discontentment. Information, what's that about? I've no idea. However, I assume it's extremely important information. Among the crowd present on the scene, other than the Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion, Meng Qing, and the other 7 Vice Mansion Masters, only Duan Lingtian, Ji Yuli, and Zhao Ji knew what it actually was. The other people were completely clueless. They were completely in the dark about the information Duan Lingtian had mentioned. Regardless, the commotion finally died down. Although most people found it unbelievable, it truly had ended peacefully just like that. At the same time, the people who were worried for Duan Lingtian sighed in relief one after another. Buzz, 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 right at this moment, sounds began to reverberate in the air. The clouds in the sky dispersed, revealing a vacuum space similar to a whirlpool. The sound began to turn louder as the vacuum space turned bigger as well. A wave of suction force surged out of the vacuum space as though it was going to devour everyone. Chapter 1764. It's opening. The entrance to the Saint Martial Secret Zone. The Saint Martial Secret Zone is opening. When the gigantic whirlpool appeared high in the sky and the suction force surged down, most people shifted their attention away from Duan Lingtian to the whirlpool in the sky. To be more exact, the entrance of the Saint Martial Secret Zone. This is the entrance to the Saint Martial Secret Zone. Duan Lingtian raised his head to look at the whirlpool high in the sky. The suction force that surged out of it seemed as though it was going to pull him in. However, it still would not be able to pull him if he did not allow it, even if its force was not something to be trifled with. It was similar to the others as well. I'm sure all of you must have heard some things about the Saint Martial Secret Zone, so I'm not going to explain anything. I only hope that all of you will reap some benefits inside the Saint Martial Secret Zone. Deaths inside the Saint Martial Secret Zone are not real deaths. However, if you die in there, you'll be sent out from the Saint Martial Secret Zone, Meng Qing, the Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion, said calmly at a speed that was neither hurried nor slow. For this reason, if it's possible, I hope that all of you will treasure your own lives in the Saint Martial Secret Zone. Only by protecting your own lives will you be able to obtain more benefits. The divine ability relics inside have a corresponding trial, so this means the trials for a high-grade divine ability relic would be difficult. Since the Saint Martial Secret Zone only allows people below the age of 40 to enter, all of you only have yourselves to rely on. The moment Meng Qing's words left his mouth, Zhu Luqi, the Palace Master of Heaven Palace, turned around and looked at the 10 Heaven Palace's disciples, including Duan Lingtian. In a while, after all of you are pulled in, you'll feel as though your divine consciousness has withdrawn. Don't panic. That's because the Saint Martial secret zone is projecting a clone for you to roam inside. It's precisely because of the clone that you won't die for real in the Saint Martial secret zone. Naturally, once your clone dies, your divine consciousness will return to your body, and you'll be sent out by the Saint Martial secret zone. Similar to what Lord Mansion Master has said earlier, all of you must treasure your lives inside if you want to reap any benefits. Now, go, relax your body, and the Saint Martial secret zone will send you in one by one. When Zhu Luqi finished speaking, many of Heaven Palace's disciples relaxed their bodies one after another. As soon as they relaxed their bodies, they began to rise up into the sky and disappeared into the gigantic whirlpool in the sky as though they had entered the mouth of a gigantic beast. Naturally, not all of Heaven Palace's disciples had entered yet. Duan Lingtian, Wang Feizan, Lu Jian, and Zhao Ji had yet to enter. What are all of you doing? Zhu Luqi frowned upon seeing this. Humph. Zhao Ji glared at Duan Lingtian with a cold look before he relaxed his body and entered the Saint Martial secret zone. I heard that after we enter the Saint Martial secret zone, everyone will be scattered in unknown places. Before three of us reunite, try not to get into any conflicts with the others. Even if there's a trace of a divine ability relic, don't investigate it alone. Duan Lingtian transmitted his voice to Wang Feizan and Lu Jian as a reminder. Since he had already decided to work together with both of them, naturally, he did not wish for them to get eliminated before he even reunited with them. Sure, Wang Feizan responded. Alright, Lu Jian quickly responded as well. Then, the three of them finally relaxed their bodies and let the entrance of the Saint Martial secret zone, the whirlpool that resembled the bloody mouth of a gigantic beast, pull them in. After Duan Lingtian was pulled in, everything turned dark before his divine consciousness trembled. It was extracted from his body by a mysterious energy that sent it away to an unknown place in just a flash. Duan Lingtian did not know how long had passed when he discovered his divine consciousness had returned to his body. He opened his eyes and discovered the clone felt like his own body. Duan Lingtian was surprised he did not find anything amiss. If it was not for the fact that his spatial ring was not present on his finger, it would have been difficult for him to distinguish if this was a clone or his real body. Everything felt extremely natural. Before entering the Saint Martial secret zone, Duan Lingtian had learned of some information regarding it. This included the clone projection, and how the spatial ring would not be present in the clone. Since the spatial ring was missing from the clone, this meant he was not allowed to rely on external tools, and he could only rely on his own ability and techniques in the Saint Martial secret zone. Naturally, if he managed to find any saint weapons or Dao talismans in the Saint Martial secret zone, he was allowed to use them. Moreover, whatever he obtained in the Saint Martial secret zone, for instance, saint weapons and Dao talismans, would appear next to his real body when he chose to leave the Saint Martial secret zone. At that moment when he returned to his real body, the items he obtained would leave the Saint Martial secret zone along with his body. Naturally, if he died in the Saint Martial secret zone, the items he managed to obtain would not materialize next to his body. In the Saint Martial secret zone, apart from dying, there were two other methods to leave the Saint Martial secret zone. One was to remain standing, motionless, and communicate with the Saint Martial secret zone using one's divine consciousness. The Saint Martial secret zone would then send one out. The other method was to stay in the Saint Martial secret zone for a full 3 months. At that time, no matter where one was in the Saint Martial secret zone, one would be forcefully sent out. This is the Saint Martial secret zone. Duan Lingtian looked around and discovered he was in a forest. All he could see were towering trees and dense bushes. Occasionally, some strange noise would sound from behind the bushes as though warning him that it was a dangerous place. Roar. Accompanied by a roar, a black figure charged out from the bushes toward Duan Lingtian at lightning speed. With just one glance, Duan Lingtian saw a pair of bloodshot eyes on the black figure. Upon closer inspection, he saw that it was a ferocious black wolf. Naturally, it was not an ordinary black wolf. Based on Duan Lingtian's judgment, the speed that the black wolf was charging toward him was comparable to an early pristine saint stage powerhouse. Based on how mindless it was apparent it was just a wild beast. Naturally, a wild beast at this level posed no threat to Duan Lingtian at all. Duan Lingtian did not make any move. With just his thought alone, true origin surged out of his body and transformed into more than 10 golden sword blades that swept across the sky, before leaving mortal wounds on its body. Crash! The black wolf's dead body crashed on the ground, sending dust flying everywhere. Roar, roar. As soon as Duan Lingtian killed the black wolf, more roars resonated from all directions. After a while, streaks of black figures leapt out of the bushes surrounding Duan Lingtian. Similar to the black wolf lying on the ground, they were all wild beasts. Wolf pack. Duan Lingtian was slightly surprised. It did not cross his mind that the death of the black wolf would attract a pack of wolves. Moreover, the wolves in this pack were all at the pristine saint stage as well. The weakest one was at the early pristine saint stage, and some were at the intermediate pristine saint stage. However, to Duan Lingtian, there was no difference whether it was the early or intermediate pristine saint stage. As the sun true origin surged out of his body, streaks of golden sword rays swept across the vast sky. The black wolves collapsed one by one, their blood forming a river. However, the death of these black wolves did not scare them at all. Instead, it only served to make them go into a frenzy as they charged at Duan Lingtian one after another. However, no matter if they were in a frenzy, only one outcome awaited them. Death. In the end, even the Wolf King revealed itself. It was a black wolf that had a mix of golden fur. Its body size was 3 times bigger than those ordinary black wolves. Its cultivation base had even entered the peak of the pristine saint stage. However, so what if it was at the peak of the pristine saint stage? With Duan Lingtian's ability that was even more powerful than an early eminent saint stage powerhouse, killing a wild beast at the peak of the pristine saint stage was as easy as killing a chicken. Whoosh! The battle had finally come to an end once he killed the Wolf King. Are these real wild beasts or illusory wild beasts formed from an illusory formation? Even Duan Lingtian was uncertain about this since everything he had experienced earlier felt real. Moreover, even his clone felt exactly like the real him. Due to this reason, he became skeptical. I'll look around and see if I can find the others. Duan Lingtian thought of Wang Feizan and Lu Jian before rising up into the sky. Then, he flew above the forest and flew rapidly once he decided on a direction. During his journey, many flying-type wild beasts attacked him as well, but all of them were killed by him in the end. Among the flying-type wild beasts, even the weakest ones were only at the peak of the pristine saint stage, so they were no threats to Duan Lingtian at all. I wonder where are the others now? When Duan Lingtian finally left the forest, a grassland that stretched out as far as the eyes could see appeared in front of him. For a moment, he could not help but smile wryly. How big exactly was this Saint Martial secret zone? When the 10 Heaven Palace's disciples, including Duan Lingtian, were roaming around the Saint Martial secret zone, at the entrance of the Saint Martial secret zone in the main mansion of the mystical Sky Mansion, the other 20 Saint Stage disciples from the 3 palaces were entering the Saint Martial secret zone one by one as well. After a moment, only the group of mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials were left outside. Qian Ping Sheng, the palace master of Yellow Palace, looked at Zhao Deng as he chuckled and said, Zhao Deng, I heard there was a huge dispute between your son and Lingtian. If they happen to meet inside, your son will most likely be doomed, you know. Although Qian Ping Sheng was also a vice mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion, he was from Zhao Deng's father's generation. Due to this reason, he had always treated Zhao Deng like a junior whenever they interacted. Zhao Deng narrowed his eyes upon hearing Qian Ping Sheng's words. To be honest, this thought did not cross his mind at all. Now that he thought about it, his heart was filled with worry. Chapter 1765. For Mystical Sky Mansion's disciples, they could only enter the Mystical Sky Mansion's Saint Martial secret zone once at most in their entire lives. This was because the interval between the openings of the Saint Martial secret zone was very long. It was impossible for a Saint Stage disciple below the age of 40 to enter it twice or more. It was exactly because of this, Zhao Deng really wished his son would be able to find a high-grade divine ability relic in the Saint Martial secret zone and memorize the divine ability contained in it so that he would be able to comprehend it in the future when he had broken through to the divine saint stage. At that time, his son would be able to rise to the top and stand a chance in becoming the next mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion. However, when he heard Qian Ping Sheng's words, he became anxious immediately. With the enmity between Lingtian and his son, Lingtian would definitely not show any mercy if he met his son in the Saint Martial secret zone. Moreover, he might even kill his son immediately. If his son was killed, although it was not a real death, he would be eliminated and sent out of the Saint Martial secret zone. He would then lose the chance to memorize and comprehend the divine ability contained in a high-grade divine ability relic. This was not something he was willing to see. Due to this reason, Zhao Deng's expression turned grim. he said through clenched teeth. If he dares to interfere with my son memorizing the divine ability relic due to personal enmity, my Zhao clan will never let him go. At this moment, Zhao Dang had lost his composure a little. It was as though he had forgotten Meng Qing, the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion, was just next to him. Humph. As expected, the moment Zhao Dang's words left his mouth, Meng Qing snorted as his sharp gaze instantly shifted to Zhao Dang. Vice Mansion Master Zhao, don't forget the rules Mystical Sky Mansion has set for the Saint Martial Secret Zone. Killing one another is allowed inside the Saint Martial Secret Zone since nobody knows what's actually going on inside. After all, nobody knew if there was a third person present on the scene when two people were fighting inside the Saint Martial Secret Zone. Under such circumstances, even if one was not eliminated by his opponent, he might slander another person after being eliminated from the Saint Martial Secret Zone. Although the person being slandered could swear on the lightning penalty oath, it was still considered a humiliating matter. Since being killed in the Saint Martial Secret Zone would not result in real deaths, whether it was the Mystical Sky Mansion or other quasi-third-rate forces, all of them allowed killings of people in the same sect inside the Saint Martial Secret Zone. The person who was eliminated could only blame himself for not being as powerful as the others since those who were eliminated were usually on the weaker side. Someone like that had a much slimmer chance to break through to the Divine Saint stage and successfully comprehend the divine ability contained in a high-grade divine ability relic. I'm sorry, Lord Mansion Master, it was an inappropriate remark. Upon hearing Meng Qing's stern words, Zhao Dang regained his senses immediately. He broke out in cold sweat and quickly explained himself, even if my good-for-nothing son is really killed by Ling Tian and is eliminated by the Saint Martial Secret Zone, I can only blame him for being weak. My Zhao clan won't hold a grudge over this, let alone make a move on him. I hope you mean what you said. Meng Qing glanced at Zhao Dang indifferently, making the latter feel ill at ease. 3 months were nothing but just a blink of an eye for the high-ranking officials of Mystical Sky Mansion present on the scene. For this reason, they were in no hurry to leave. Instead, they sat cross-legged in the sky and closed their eyes to attain mental composure while waiting for the Mystical Sky Mansion's disciples to come out from the Saint Martial Secret Zone. In just a blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. During these 3 days, no Mystical Sky Mansion's disciples were eliminated from the Saint Martial Secret Zone. Lord Mansion Master. At this moment, a voice resonated from afar. After a while, an ancient figure appeared. It was an elder of Mystical Sky Mansion. This Mystical Sky Mansion's elder was an elder who was in charge of patrolling the main mansion during this period of time. It had to be important for him to appear at this time looking for the Mansion Master. For this reason, apart from Meng Qing, the Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion, the group of high-ranking officials opened their eyes one after another and looked at the Mystical Sky Mansion's elder, causing him to feel slightly anxious. Although he was an elder of Mystical Sky Mansion, the person with the highest position among the group in front of him, apart from Ji Yuli, was the Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion. He did not even dare to breathe loudly in front of these people. Under the stares of the Mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials, this Mystical Sky Mansion's elder quickly looked at Meng Qing, the Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion, and responded respectfully, Lord Mansion Master, somebody from the Azure Cloud Mansion is here. Azure Cloud Mansion. Upon hearing the Mystical Sky Mansion's elder's words, Meng Qing was not the only one who raised a brow. The others widened their eyes as well. The Azure Cloud Mansion was a quasi-third-rate force like their Mystical Sky Mansion. Perhaps the Azure Cloud Mansion's strength was similar to the Mystical Sky Mansion in the past. However, the Azure Cloud Mansion's current strength was far superior to them. Not only that, but they could even be considered as on par with the Mountainshade Black Market. All of this was because a new Mansion Master who was monstrously strong had appeared in the Azure Cloud Mansion. Under the leadership of the new Mansion Master, the Azure Cloud Mansion rose to the top. Currently, its strength was in no way inferior to the Mountainshade Black Market. Ever since the Mansion Master of Azure Cloud Mansion appeared, nobody from the Azure Cloud Mansion had taken the initiative to visit the Mystical Sky Mansion at all. Due to this reason, the group of Mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials, including Meng Qing the Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion, found it strange that someone from the Azure Cloud Mansion would suddenly pay them a visit. Meng Qing looked at the Mystical Sky Mansion's elder who came to report this and asked in a deep voice, "Who's the one who came?" "It's Ku Mi." When the Mystical Sky Mansion's elder mentioned Ku Mi's name, his voice trembled slightly. "Ku Mi." Upon hearing the mystical Sky Mansion's elder's words, apart from Meng Qing who had a slight frown on his face, horror dawned on the others one by one. Ku Mi was someone with a notorious reputation in the Azure Cloud Mansion. He was known as the Azure Profound Heroic Duo along with another powerful figure from the Azure Cloud Mansion. He was also the right arm of the current Mansion Master of Azure Cloud Mansion. In terms of strength, Ku Mi and Rong Yuan from the Azure Cloud Mansion were in no way inferior to the two great guardians of the mystical Sky Mansion. In fact, they might even be stronger. Since Ku Mi had personally paid a visit to the mystical Sky Mansion, there was no way it was an ordinary visit. It had to be because of some important matter. It was not difficult for Meng Qing and the others to come to this conclusion. Go and invite him here, Meng Qing ordered as he looked at the mystical Sky Mansion's elder who came here to report the matter. If it was the Mansion Master of Azure Cloud Mansion who personally came, Meng Qing would have personally welcomed him. However, since the person who came was Ku Mi, he was still not worthy of the Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion to personally welcome him. Yes, the Mystical Sky Mansion's elder responded before he left. After he left, the group of Mystical Sky Mansion's Vice Mansion Masters present on the scene, other than Meng Qing and Ji Yuli, buried their heads together to discuss the matter. Ku Mi from the Azure Cloud Mansion is quite fierce. Why did he come to our Mystical Sky Mansion? In the Azure Cloud Mansion, Ku Mi and Rong Yuan's positions are equivalent to our Mystical Sky Mansion's two great guardians. It has to be some important matter for him to visit our Mystical Sky Mansion. Our Mystical Sky Mansion doesn't interact much with the Azure Cloud Mansion usually. I wonder what he's here for. While they were discussing the matter, hints of dread could be seen in the eyes of the Vice Mansion Masters of the Mystical Sky Mansion. Even Zhu Luqi, the Palace Master of Heaven Palace, the strongest among them, was wary when he spoke about Ku Mi. Despite being in the same generation as Ku Mi, even he could not help but shudder when he recalled the other person's notorious reputation. In the Mystical Sky Mansion, it was very likely that only the Mansion Master would be able to overpower Ku Mi. Soon after, the Mystical Sky Mansion's elder returned with a skinny old man who was dressed entirely in a black robe. The temperature seemed to drop in the wake of the black-robed old man. Other than Meng Qing, the Mansion Master of Mystical Sky Mansion, the others felt chills running up their spines when they saw the black-robed old man. The subtle pressure the black-robed old man emitted was just too heavy for them. It was so heavy that they could barely endure it. I'm Ku Mi. Good day to you, Mansion Master Meng. The black-robed old man cupped his hands in front of his chest slightly toward Meng Qing as he nodded his head indifferently as a greeting. Meng Qing's eyes flashed momentarily when he saw the black-robed old man and exclaimed in surprise, Elder Ku, your prowess seems to have improved a lot compared to the last time we met. Don't joke with this old man, Mansion Master Meng. Even if I managed to improve in these few years, I'm still far from being your match, Mansion Master Meng. The black-robed old man was none other than the Azure Cloud Mansion's Ku Mi. Although he was just standing there, he gave off an intimidating aura. Only Meng Qing was able to ignore the aura. I wonder what's the purpose of your visit, Elder Ku? Meng Qing asked with a smile. He did not think too much of Ku Mi if it was just him alone. However, he did not dare to simply offend the Azure Cloud Mansion even though he had the powerful Mystical Sky Mansion behind him. For this reason, he was polite and respectful when he spoke to Ku Mi. He did not dare to be negligent at all. Ku Mi did not beat around the bush as he said bluntly, Mansion Master Meng, I know you're a straightforward person so I won't beat around the bush. The purpose I came this time is to take a look at a new disciple the Mystical Sky Mansion has recently recruited. New disciple. The moment Ku Mi's words left his mouth, Meng Qing and the others were stunned for a moment. After a while, a figure emerged in their minds at the same time. The owner of that figure was none other than Duan Ling Tian. Naturally, Meng Qing and the others only knew him as Ling Tian. Ku Mi, you came here for Ling Tian? Meng Qing asked bluntly. Yes, Ku Mi nodded. May I know why you came for Ling Tian, Ku Mi? Meng Qing asked again. Actually, Meng Qing also knew his questions was a little unnecessary. Since the other party was the right arm of the Mansion Master of Azure Cloud Mansion, the reason he came to the Mystical Sky Mansion to look for Ling Tian was to snatch Ling Tian away and take him back to the Azure Cloud Mansion. Chapter 1766. Chapter 1767 Enemies who meet at close quarters. Mansion Master Meng and everyone else present on the scene, if I'm not mistaken, you must think I'm here to snatch a disciple from the Mystical Sky Mansion, right? The moment Qmi spoke, one could tell he was a straightforward person who did not like beat around the bushes. This time, before Meng Qing, the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion, could reply, Zhu Luqi, the palace master of Heaven Palace, asked, isn't it so? In fact, Ling Tian was from his Heaven Palace. So one had to ask the palace master of Heaven Palace if one wanted to take one of his palace's disciples away. No. Faced with a guarded Zhu Luqi, Qmi shook his head. Subsequently, under the shocked gazes of Meng Qing and the others, he replied nonchalantly, the reason I came here is to have a look at the genius of your Mystical Sky Mansion. That's all. I'll return immediately once I see him. I'll not linger any longer than necessary. Qmi, with the lofty position you have in the Azure Cloud Mansion, usually we'll believe you. However, since this matter concerns Ling Tian, we have no choice but to be more guarded. You said that you only want to have a look at Ling Tian, but how will we know if you secretly transmit a message to persuade Ling Tian to join your Azure Cloud Mansion? Zhu Luqi was blunt with his words. At this moment, there was no reason for him to be polite. Upon hearing Zhu Luqi's words, Qmi merely snorted. The temperature on the scene instantly felt as though it had dropped by a few degrees. Qmi, has always been frank and open with my actions. I'll never stoop to such low and petty methods. Please don't get angry, Elder Qu. Zhu Luqi didn't mean it intentionally. He doesn't know you well after all. Meng Qing quickly intervened to mediate the matter in a timely manner. Although he was not afraid of Qmi, he was wary of the colossus backing Qmi, the Azure Cloud Mansion. Elder Qu is a distant guest. By right, I should have welcomed you properly, but I'm unable to leave for the time being. I'm sure you know as well, Elder Qu, that our Mystical Sky Mansion's St. Martial Secret Zone has opened 3 days ago, and it'll remain so for the coming 3 months. According to our customary rule, we'll have to stay and wait here, Meng Qing added again. It doesn't matter. You can wait all you want, and I'll return to the Azure Cloud Mansion once I've seen Ling Tian when he comes out, Qmi replied. It was apparent that he planned to stay here and wait along with Meng Qing and the others. Upon hearing Qmi's words, horror dawned on Zhu Luqi's face. When he was just about to say something again, he was stopped by Meng Qing in a timely manner. Meng Qing transmitted his voice, I'm sure you've heard the news about Ling Tian as well, he has a master in the upper province and wouldn't stay long in the lower province. Even if he decides to go to the Azure Cloud Mansion, it won't be much of a loss to us. Not only that, but we'll be able to forge a good relationship with him. That little fellow is a person who's loyal and faithful after all. Meng Qing had sent his men to double confirm the news about Ling Tian. They managed to trace it back to Ren Fei from the Sky Hurdle Mansion. He knew the news Ren Fei had spread came directly from Duan Ling Tian's mouth. Moreover, he also knew Duan Ling Tian had planned to work together with Ren Fei in the St. Martial Secret Zone in order to help Li Feng repay his debt. Unfortunately, Ren Fei did not live up to expectation and failed to earn a spot to enter the St. Martial Secret Zone. It resulted in him losing a chance to memorize a high-grade divine ability relic. When Zhu Luqi heard Meng Qing's voice transmission, he fell silent and no longer spoke. Just like that, another person had joined them in waiting for the 30 Mystical Sky Mansion's disciples to come out from the St. Martial Secret Zone. At this moment, Duan Ling Tian was, naturally, unaware that his father's right-hand man, Qmi, had already come to the Mystical Sky Mansion and was waiting with Mansion Master Meng Qing and the others for him to come out. 3 days have gone by, but I've only come across a few people who are not from the Heaven Palace. After roaming around in the St. Martial Secret Zone for 3 days, there were many wild beasts that died in Duan Ling Tian's hand. Moreover, he had also reaped some benefits. However, he did find them useful, so he did not bring them with him since he found it burdensome. Due to the reason he was only a clone now, he did not have his spatial ring with him, which meant he did not have the 7 treasures exquisite pagoda as well. For this reason, no matter what he obtained, he would have to carry it with his hands. It was extremely inconvenient. All of a sudden, Duan Ling Tian narrowed his eyes as though he had noticed something and looked in the distant. He saw a swift figure flying across the sky and soon gathered another person who flew at the other side of the figure. When the 2 figures met, it seemed like they began to speak to one another. Then, the latter began to follow the former to the direction where the former came from earlier. Due to the reason both of them were far away, none of them noticed Duan Ling Tian's presence. Duan Ling Tian had only been able to see them was because he had activated his strange pupil. When he activated his strange pupil to look in the distant, it would not take a toll on his spiritual energy if the time taken was not too long. That person seems to have found something, huh? Duan Lingtian could tell it was something out of the ordinary. Due to his curiosity, he followed the two figures to see where they were headed. Initially, it was quite uneventful when he tailed them. However, after he tailed them for a while, a loud cry resonated in the air. A gigantic flying-type wild beast charged out from the clouds straight toward Duan Lingtian. With just one glance, Duan Lingtian, who had activated his divine eye, could tell the flying-type wild beast was at the mastery pristine saint stage. With just a raise of his hand, he killed it instantly. I've been found out. When Duan Lingtian killed the flying-type wild beast, he discovered the two people in front had turned around and was fast approaching him. Naturally, these two only discovered him after the flying-type wild beast had appeared. Soon after, Duan Lingtian was revealed before them. Lingtian. When the two people saw Duan Lingtian, they narrowed their eyes immediately. Initially, they thought they might encounter someone who would be willing to work together with them. It did not cross their minds they would encounter this monster instead. Nobody among the people who had entered the Saint Martial's secret zone was stronger than this person standing before them. He was so powerful he did not need to work together with them at all. Seeing the two of them approaching him, he raised a brow before narrowing his eyes. He asked, "You two have found something, right?" And no. When they heard his words, their expressions turned a little unnatural, but they denied in unison. How laughable. Would they be able to get a share if they let Lingtian know about the things they had found? Duan Lingtian was not surprised by their response, but he was not angry either. With a nonchalant smile, he responded, "In that case, let me send both of you out then." Originally, both of them had thought the matter would end just like that when they saw him smile. However, before they could even heave a sigh of relief, their faces turned green when they heard his words. Send them out. They knew very well what Duan Lingtian meant. He was going to kill them and send them out of the Saint Martial secret zone. Once they were sent out, it would mean they would no longer be able to obtain all the good items in the Saint Martial secret zone, particularly those divine ability relics. All these things would no longer have anything to do with them. Lingtian, it seems like we remembered wrongly. We've indeed found something. Soon after, both of them exchanged a glance and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. After coming to a tacit understanding, one of them quickly looked at Duan Lingtian and tried to save the situation. "What's it?" Duan Lingtian asked. "It's a very strange place, and it seems like there are more than one formations there. I suspect there's a divine ability relic inside," that person replied. "A divine ability relic?" Duan Lingtian lifted his brows slightly, astonished. Then, he glanced at them indifferently before saying, "Lead the way." Yes, yes. Despite the calm tone that Duan Lingtian used when he was talking to them, it still carried with it a weight that pressured them. After all, this fellow in front of them was not a kind person. They could tell this from how he slapped Zhao Ji twice publicly. Who was Zhao Ji? Vice Mansion Master Zhao's only son. Guardian Zhao's biological grandson. In the mystical Sky Mansion, Zhao Ji was number one among the second generation. However, someone like that was publicly slapped twice by Lingtian. One could see just how merciless Lingtian was. Faced with such a merciless person, they had no choice but to meekly submit to him. For this reason, while they were leading the way anxiously, they did not dare to play any tricks at all. If they did that, who knew if they might be killed and kicked out of the Saint Martial secret zone in the next second. This was something they did not want to see happen. During the journey, Duan Lingtian said nonchalantly, "Tell me everything you know. I'm the only one who has been to that place for the time being. The moment I entered, I instantly encountered 3 powerful wild beasts at the peak of the pristine saint stage. Not only that, but it seems like they know how to coordinate their attacks. If I didn't flee in time, I would have died in that place," the person said. "After I've fled that place, I searched around for someone to work with. That's when I encountered Peng Sen, who's also Mystical Palace's disciple just like me. Our cultivation base is about the same. When I saw him, I instantly told him about what happened and persuaded him to work with me." As he was talking, he looked at the young man next to him. At the same time, he introduced himself to Duan Lingtian. "I'm Hu Rui, a Mystical Palace's disciple." At this moment, Peng Sen's eyes landed in the distance. He was momentarily stunned. When he regained his senses, he instantly exclaimed in a deep voice, "Isn't that Zhao Ji?" At the same time, his eyes instinctively shifted to Duan Lingtian who was near him. He thought to himself, Lingtian wouldn't just kill Zhao Ji just like that, right? The moment he thought of this, chills ran up his spine immediately. Zhao Ji. The instant Peng Sen's words left his mouth, Duan Lingtian looked in the direction Peng Sen was looking at. With just a glance, he saw Zhao Ji flying in the distance. As soon as Duan Ling spotted him, Zhao Ji also discovered him immediately. Horror instantly dawned on him. *T. Why do I have to encounter him? When Zhao Ji saw Duan Lingtian, he did not have time to think of anything else. The first thought that appeared in his mind was to flee. Damn it, why am I so unlucky? The Saint Martial's secret zone's so big, but I've already encountered this fellow after only 3 days. While Zhao Ji was fleeing, he was panicking, and his heart burned with anxiety. Chapter 1767. At this moment, when Duan Lingtian saw Zhao Ji, he could not help but muse to himself how small this world was. He did not encounter more than 10 people after 3 days in the Saint Martial secret zone. However, it just so happened that Zhao Ji was among these fewer than 10 people he encountered. Although Duan Lingtian was quite unwilling to admit it, he had no choice but to acknowledge he really had fate with Zhao Ji. Otherwise, how was it possible for him to encounter Zhao Ji so fast in the vast and boundless Saint Martial secret zone? Fleeing. When Duan Lingtian saw Zhao Ji was fleeing with all his might after seeing him, he finally regained his senses. He sneered as a wicked gleam appeared in his eyes just like a cat that had caught sight of a mouse. One had to admit Zhao Ji's speed was incredibly fast. How could it not be? No matter what, he was still an intermediate refined Saint stage martial cultivator. In just a blink of an eye, Zhao Ji's silhouette disappeared from Hu Rui and Peng Sen's eyes. However, in the field of vision of Duan Lingtian's strange pupil, his silhouette appeared particularly clear. It was only getting further away. Wait for me right here. If both of you dare to escape, you'll have to bear the consequences. Duan Lingtian looked at them nonchalantly before he moved in just a flash. In just a blink of an eye, he disappeared from both their sights and chased after Zhao Ji in an even faster speed. Not long after, his silhouette disappeared before Hu Rui and Peng Sen's eyes. The two of them glanced at each other before asking in unison, should we flee? Then, both of them came to a tacit understanding and charged toward a direction rapidly. We can't head toward the original direction, we must head in another direction and return to that place after a few days. Otherwise, we'll definitely be caught by Lingtian. Let's seize the chance and head in another direction to shake him off our tails while he chases after Zhao Ji. They were not so stupid as to wait for Duan Lingtian to come back. They were not idiots. If Duan Lingtian came back, would there still be a share for them at that place that seemed to hide a divine ability relic? Meanwhile, Zhao Ji's silhouette became clearer and clearer in Duan Lingtian's eyes. He was closing in on Zhao Ji. Initially, Duan Lingtian was chasing after Zhao Ji using a speed that was equivalent to a martial cultivator at the peak of the refined saint stage. However, now that he had left Hu Rui and Peng Sen's sight, he no longer held back and used his entire Sun True energy. It immediately granted him an even faster speed. Currently, his speed was equivalent to the speed of an early eminent saint stage martial cultivator. Whoosh! Duan Lingtian's figure was like a cannonball that was shot out in a bolt of lightning. In just a blink of an eye, he overtook Zhao Ji and blocked his path. Whoosh! When Zhao Ji saw a figure appearing in his path, horror dawned on him immediately. When he finally came to a halt and saw the person who blocked his path, his face turned green. Lingtian. Unlike Zhao Ji who was panting, Duan Lingtian looked unaffected. As he looked at Zhao Ji calmly, he greeted him calmly as well, tisk tisk, great young Master Zhao, we meet again. When he was talking, he gradually strode forward, closing in on Zhao Ji. With every stride he took, it scared Zhao Ji so much that he quickly took a few steps back in a hurry. However, the distance between the two of them was getting smaller and smaller. Lingtian, what are you trying to do? Zhao Ji looked at Duan Lingtian with a grave expression, if you dare to touch me, my Zhao clan will never let you go once I get kicked out. It was apparent Zhao Ji had begun to realize the perilous situation he was in, so he began to threaten Duan Lingtian. However, he forgot that if Duan Lingtian dared to slap him twice publicly, how could he be afraid of their Zhao clan? His action, at that time, was enough to prove he was not afraid of the Zhao clan. Slap! A loud and crisp sound of a slap resonated in the air. Duan Lingtian appeared like a ghost in front of Zhao Ji and slapped him, causing one half of Zhao Ji's face to swell immediately. Although it's just a clone, the feeling's no different from when I'm in own body. What a pleasant slap that was, Duan Lingtian said smugly before he looked at the palm he used to slap Zhao Ji and blew on it. Zhao Ji was horrified, he was glaring at Duan Lingtian with bulging eyes. Zhao Ji's expression turned grave as he was about to say something. Slap, another slap. Just like before, Zhao Ji's face was like a swollen pig head. Duan Lingtian grinned at Zhao Ji and said nonchalantly, "Great young Master Zhao, it looks like your memory is not that good." When his smile entered Zhao Ji's sight, it was no different from a devil. "Lingtian, you better think this through properly." However, this time, Zhao Ji did not keep his mouth shut like before. Instead, he warned in his deep voice, "The situation now is completely different from last time. If you dare to touch me here and get me eliminated from the Saint Martial secret zone, our Zhao clan will lose a high-grade divine ability. At that time, an irreconcilable enmity will definitely form between you and the Zhao clan. The Mansion Master has also learned about your matter. Due to this reason, he won't take you in as his disciple, let alone his last disciple. Without the Mansion Master's protection, you won't be able to withstand the wrath of the Zhao clan even if you have a close relationship Ji Yuli. If you let me go today, I'll disregard how you publicly slapped me twice now and before. The Zhao clan won't make things difficult for you or come after you." In order to survive in the Saint Martial secret zone, Zhao Ji decided to use the soft approach after using the hard method. As for the things he said at the second half of the sentence, naturally, it was only to deceive Duan Lingtian so that he would not do anything to him. This was because he knew once Duan Lingtian made his move, he would definitely die. Even if it was only a clone in the Saint Martial secret zone, and he would not die for real, he would still be kicked out of the Saint Martial secret zone and no longer be able to look for a high-grade divine ability relic. It sounds not bad. After hearing Zhao Ji's words, Duan Lingtian nodded. When Zhao Ji saw how Duan Lingtian was seemingly persuaded, he seized this chance to make his point. "Lingtian, I believe you're a smart person. I'm sure you know the saying, having a friend is better than having an enemy. If you let me go today, I, Zhao Ji, and the Zhao clan are willing to be your friends." "Friends with you, Zhao Ji, and the Zhao clan?" Duan Lingtian smiled as he looked at Zhao Ji. Yes, Zhao Ji smiled as well, thinking that Duan Lingtian was smiling because he was delighted. However, he cursed inwardly, "Lingtian, I'll let you be happy for now, but after we leave, my Zhao clan will spare no efforts in killing you. I'm sorry, though, I'm not interested." Duan Lingtian's smile abruptly disappeared, and it was replaced with an extremely cold expression. Upon seeing this, horror dawned on Zhao Ji. He instantly turned around to try and escape. However, would he be able to escape? Whoosh! With a raise of Duan Lingtian's hand, the Sun True Origin surged out and transformed into a golden light sword in just a blink of an eye. He slashed the sword at Zhao Ji who had turned around. Faced with Duan Lingtian, Zhao Ji could not rouse any battle intent at all. Coupled with the fact that his back was completely exposed in front of Duan Lingtian, it only took Duan Lingtian one strike of the sword to kill him. The golden sword light flashed and cut Zhao Ji's body into half. Despite that, a gory image did not appear. At the instant when Zhao Ji's body was cut into half, his body vanished into thin air immediately as though he was never there at all. He was only a clone after all. Naturally, there would be no gory scene to be seen. He has just entered 3 days before he got eliminated. I'm afraid Zhao Ji will be the first one among the 30 mystical Sky Mansion's disciples to get eliminated. After killing Zhao Ji, a sneer appeared on Duan Lingtian's face. At the same time, Zhao Ji who had been eliminated had his divine consciousness return to his original body as well. At that moment it returned to his body was shrouded by a powerful propulsive force, and he was subsequently pushed out of the Saint Martial secret zone. The entrance of the Saint Martial secret zone, the gigantic whirlpool, was also the exit of the Saint Martial secret zone. Be it in or out, there was only one place to go through. Currently, the group of high-ranking officials of Mystical Sky Mansion was still waiting at the same place. Additionally, there were a sturdy young man and a black-robed old man. The former was Ji Yuli while the latter was Ku Mi. At this moment, the group of people was sitting cross-legged on the air with their eyes shut as they attained mental composure. All of a sudden, as though they had noticed something, they opened their eyes one after another and immediately shifted their eyes to the gigantic whirlpool in the sky high above their heads. It's only been 3 days, but somebody has already been eliminated. Meng Qing, the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion, slightly frowned. At once, the 4 palaces' palace masters stood gazing at one another. Each of them was praying that it was not a disciple from their respective palaces. After all, being kicked out from the Saint Martial secret zone in just 3 days was undoubtedly very humiliating. The palace that this disciple was from would be equally humiliated as well. Buzz, 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 comma. While the 4 palaces' palace masters were thinking to themselves, the whirlpool continued to churn as a figure finally appeared before their eyes. When the figure was finally revealed, everyone, apart from Qi, was shocked. After a while, Zhao Dang was the first to regain his senses among all the vice mansion masters of Mystical Sky Mansion. At the moment he regained his senses, horror dawned on him, and he cried out wretchedly, "Jir!" It did not cross his mind, not even in his wildest dreams, that the first person to be kicked out of the Saint Martial secret zone after only 3 days would be his son. It's Zhao Ji. How's this possible? Zhao Ji's not only a Heaven Palace's disciple, but his cultivation base has already entered the intermediate refined saint stage as well. How's it possible for him to get eliminated from the Saint Martial secret zone so quickly? This is not possible with his strength. In the history of our Mystical Sky Mansion, the intermediate refined saint stage disciple who came out of the Saint Martial secret zone in the fastest time seems to be able to endure for 1.5 months. However, Zhao Ji's eliminated after only 3 days. He's completely broken the record. Looks like Zhao Ji is going to go down in the history of Mystical Sky Mansion as the fastest person to be eliminated. The group of vice mansion masters of Mystical Sky Mansion whispered among themselves. Their eyes contained hints of pity as they looked at him. Perhaps, Zhao Ji's name would be remembered in the history of Mystical Sky Mansion, but it would not be in a good way. To be honest, it would be more appropriate to say he would be infamous for this. However, since his father was a vice mansion master, and his grandfather was a guardian, they did not dare to cross the line too much. Chapter 1768. Jir, you, Zhao Dang was completely shocked when he saw his own son. Not even in his wildest dreams did he imagine his son would be the first to be kicked out of the Saint Martial secret zone. Before Ling Tian entered the Mystical Sky Mansion, his son could be considered as one of the few strongest people among the younger generation in the Mystical Sky Mansion. In terms of strength, he was 90% stronger than the group of people who entered the Saint Martial secret zone. However, his son was eliminated in just 3 days. Meanwhile, Zhao Ji's expression was extremely grim after he was kicked out. Intense anger could be seen burning in his eyes. Ling Tian, I'll never let you go. I'll never let you go. When Zhao Dang heard Zhao Ji growling, his expression turned grave immediately. The thing he had feared the most had come to pass. His son had encountered Ling Tian in the Saint Martial secret zone and was eliminated. Elder Qian, you're such a jinx, tisk tisk. At this moment, many people looked at Qian Pingsheng, the palace master of Yellow Palace, and felt his words were too accurate since he had just asked Zhao Dang what would happen if his son encountered Ling Tian. Lo and behold, Zhao Ji did indeed encounter Ling Tian and had most likely been eliminated earlier than he should have. The space inside the Saint Martial secret zone is so vast, and there's only a handful of people one would be able to encounter in 3 days. However, Zhao Ji had coincidentally encountered Ling Tian. Should I say both of them are a destined pair, or is it like the saying, enemies would frequently run into each other? The palace master of Earth Palace mused emotionally. Isn't it obvious this is a case of enemies frequently running into each other? The palace master of Mystical Palace chuckled at someone else's misfortune. Only the palace master of Heaven Palace did not have a delighted expression. No matter what, Zhao Ji was still a disciple of Heaven Palace. However, when he remembered Ling Tian was also a Heaven Palace's disciple, his expression eased up a little and only a wry smile remained on his face. Could he blame Ling Tian? Impossible. If he was in Ling Tian's shoes, he would most likely not show any mercy too if he encountered Zhao Ji. When Zhao Ji regained his senses, he looked at Zhao Dang as he clenched his teeth. His tone was terrifying and filled with hatred, as though he would never be at peace if Duan Ling Tian did not die, as he said, "Father, Ling Tian killed me and got me eliminated. I want to kill him. I want to kill him." Upon hearing his words, everyone present on the scene, apart from Meng Qing and Qi, had a horrified expression on their faces. Although Meng Qing's expression did not turn horrified, his expression turned grave. Somebody had just declared that he wanted to kill a disciple from the same sect in front of him. Slap. At this moment, when Meng Qing's expression turned grave, the sound of a loud and crisp slap resonated in the air. As it turned out, Zhao Dang had instantly gone up to his son and slapped him, causing one half of Zhao Ji's face to swell up. Zhao Ji was dumbfounded when he saw his father in front of him. Earlier, he had already been slapped twice by Ling Tian in the Saint Martial secret zone. Now that he was out, he thought his father would console him. He did not think he would get a slap instead. At this instant, Zhao Ji felt there was no reason for him to live in this world anymore. Idiot, Lord Mansion Master is present on the scene, but you still dare to say such words. Right at this moment, Zhao Dang's voice entered Zhao Ji's ears. It instantly caused Zhao Ji to snap back to reality. When he regained his senses again and looked at Mansion Master Meng Qing, he realized that the latter was looking at him coldly. It scared him so much that his face instantly paled. You swine. At this moment, Zhao Dang looked at Zhao Ji and rebuked him. What nonsense are you spouting? Even if you're eliminated from the Saint Martial secret zone by Ling Tian, you can only blame yourself for being weak and inferior. Who do you think you can blame? Zhao Ji would be extremely dumb if he still did not know his father was actually trying to safely extricate him out of the situation. Father, I'm sorry, I was wrong, it's I who's weak, Zhao Ji quickly chimed in. Although it was obvious the father and son were only putting on a show since both of them had said such words, Meng Qing, the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion, remained silent. Ji Yuli glanced at Zhao Ji and chuckled at his misfortune before asking, Zhao Ji, although you've been eliminated, you were still in there for 3 days. How was it? Did you manage to memorize any divine ability during these 3 days? When Ji Yuli's words entered Zhao Ji's ears, it was akin to pouring gasoline on a fire. Zhao Ji seemed about to burst from anger soon. However, Zhao Ji also noticed that after Ji Yuli's question, everyone, including his father, had shifted their eyes to him as though they wanted to know if he managed to memorize a divine ability. No, Zhao Ji clenched his teeth and answered in the negative. How could he possibly memorize a divine ability in 3 days? Moreover, he did not even encounter the shadow of a divine ability relic at all. What a pity, Ji Yuli let out a long sigh. It appeared as though he really felt regretful on Zhao Ji's behalf. However, if one paid closer attention, one could see hints of delight in Ji Yuli's eyes over Zhao Ji's misfortune. Ling Tian, from the beginning until the end, Who Am I merely looked on coldly from the sidelines during the commotion. However, when he heard the name Ling Tian, he felt a ripple in his heart. The purpose of his trip this time was for this young man's sake. To be exact, it was to confirm if the young man was the young mansion master of their Azure Cloud Mansion. Father, Ling Tian has gone too far in bullying me, and I want him dead. He must die. Zhao Ji looked at Zhao Dang and transmitted his roaring voice. Don't worry, he has destroyed your opportunity in memorizing and comprehending the divine ability, and this is undoubtedly a great humiliation to the Zhao clan. This is a blood feud. As long as our Zhao clan exists, we won't let him live a pleasant life. When Zhao Dang replied using voice transmission, his tone was so cold as though it came from a thaw hole, sending shivers up the listener's spine. His son was kicked out of the Saint Martial secret zone, so his anger was in no way inferior to his son. In fact, every Mystical Sky Mansion's disciple only had one opportunity at most to enter the Saint Martial secret zone in their entire life. Ling Tian had kicked his son out from the Saint Martial secret zone and cut off his son's chance to memorize and comprehend a divine ability. If there's no Ling Tian in the first place, my son would have definitely been able to comprehend a high-grade divine ability. As long as he could memorize the divine ability, he would have had a chance to master it after he makes a breakthrough to the divine saint stage in the future. Yet, everything has been destroyed by that Ling Tian. The moment Zhao Dang thought of this, a flame of hatred that seemed to be able to burn everything down could be seen in the depth of his eyes. Duan Ling Tian was, naturally, unaware of what was going on outside of the Saint Martial secret zone now. Currently, he had returned to the place where he first spotted Zhao Ji. However, he discovered the 2 Mystical Palace's disciples were already gone without a trace. To think that they dare to escape. Looks like they completely disregarded my words, Duan Ling Tian muttered to himself as he chuckled. If one paid closer attention, one would be able to hear hints of terrifying coldness in his voice. This direction. Then, Duan Ling Tian flew in the direction the 2 Mystical Palace's disciples had been leading him to earlier. According to the 2 men, Duan Ling Tian's destination was a place that seemingly hid a divine ability relic. During his journey, he activated his strange pupil. Since that mystical palace's disciple could discover the place when he flew across here, I don't think it'll be difficult for me to find that place now that I've activated the strange pupil to search for it thoroughly. As he continued on his journey, he did not see the two mystical palace's disciples at all. They're pretty smart. It seems like they didn't use this road. As time passed, it was not difficult for Duan Lingtian to come to this conclusion. Eventually, after half a day, Duan Lingtian's strange pupil finally found a strange place. It was a vast stone forest. Initially, Duan Lingtian thought it was just an ordinary stone forest, but when he looked inside carefully using his strange pupil, he noticed his vision turned blurry. Usually, this would be impossible. Duan Lingtian was very clear about the abilities of the strange pupil. He knew he could see very far and very clearly with it, let alone a stone forest that was so close to him. This stone forest is a little strange. Since he felt the stone forest was strange, he instantly charged into it. When he had gotten near the stone forest, the divine consciousness that Duan Lingtian extended out could clearly sense the fluctuations of a formation. The fluctuations were very subtle, and if it was not for Duan Lingtian's keen sense, he might not have noticed it in the first place. What a clever formation! Everything suddenly turned dark as soon as Duan Lingtian sighed emotionally. In the next moment, when the light finally appeared again, he discovered the scenery had undergone an earth-shattering change. What was before his eyes was now an empty field instead of a stone forest. At the end of the empty field was a 6 stories high tower. Duan Lingtian could clearly sense 3 auras that were rapidly gathering. After a while, 3 identical wild beasts appeared out of thin air in front of him. At first glance, these 3 wild beasts looked like panthers, but upon closer inspection, they did not resemble panthers at all. Their faces appeared a lot more ferocious than a panther. Moreover, all of them had a silver horn on their heads. Roar, roar, roar. The 3 wild beasts roared almost at the same time before they charged out. However, they were not charging toward Duan Lingtian. Instead, they were charging in different directions of his surrounding. They formed a triangle as they circled around him. Only I have been to that place for the time being. The moment I entered, I instantly encountered 3 powerful wild beasts at the peak of the pristine saint stage. Moreover, they knew how to coordinate their attacks. If I didn't flee in time, I would have died there. Duan Lingtian recalled the words of the mystical palace's disciple. Looks like this must be the place he found. There's indeed more than one formation. Other than the illusory formation outside, there are also a few interlocking formations in here. Duan Lingtian's heart jolted as he confirmed his theory. This was exactly the place he was looking for. Could the divine ability relic be in that tower? He said to himself as he shifted his gaze to the tower. Chapter 1769. At the instant Duan Lingtian's attention was on the tower, the 3 beasts that were in a triangle formation around him seemed to have been boosted by courage as they abruptly charged and pounded at Duan Lingtian. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 3 sounds were akin to the sound of sky tearing reverberated in the air. In just a blink of an eye, they were fast approaching Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian soon realized the 3 identical wild beasts were coordinating their attacks as though they had telepathic connections, making them seem like a single entity. It was as though they had coordinated an attack pattern with their bodies as the foundation. Faced with the simultaneous attacks from the 3 beasts, Duan Lingtian felt as though he was facing a wild beast at the early refined saint stage. In fact, these 3 wild beasts were merely at the peak of the pristine saint stage. What an outstanding joint attack! Although Duan Lingtian was shocked, he did not stay idle. His body flashed away as he easily dodged the attacks from the 3 wild beasts. Although the joint attack of these 3 wild beasts was equivalent to an early refined saint stage wild beast, it did not pose a threat to Duan Lingtian. After all, with Duan Lingtian's current prowess, he could defeat an early eminent saint stage wild beast. Initially, Duan Lingtian wanted to see the secret of the joint attack of these 3 beasts, but soon, he realized the secret of these joint attacks seemed to originate from their hearts and souls, so it could not be seen at all from outside. He immediately dismissed the idea of stealing their technique. I no longer want to play with the 3 of you, Duan Lingtian muttered to himself as the sun true origin surged from his body. In just a blink of an eye, thousands of golden sword rays surged out from his body. Whoosh, 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 as the sword rays whizzed around, the 3 beasts were soon pierced until they looked like a beehive. Unlike the wild beasts that Duan Lingtian encountered outside, after the 3 beasts were pierced until they looked like a beehive, no blood was shed at all. They simply disappeared into thin air as though they were never there at all. At the moment when Duan Lingtian killed the 3 wild beasts, the tower in the distance began to quake. Then, the only door of the tower, a stone door at the lowest level, gradually opened with a creak. "I'll have a look inside." Duan Lingtian's heart jolted. It was as though he had transformed into a bolt of lightning as he charged inside the tower. To be more exact, the first level of the tower. After Duan Lingtian entered the tower, his vision shook, and he could see an empty floor. At the end of the floor, a staircase led up to the second level of the tower. Although the floor was described as empty, that was not entirely the case. Apart from the staircase, there were 2 statues in there as well. Those 2 statues stood in opposition to each other. These 2 figures, Duan Lingtian shifted his gaze to the 2 statues. Upon closer inspection, he discovered something shocking. Both of these 2 statues had sturdy human bodies, but their heads were not the heads of humans. Instead, they both had the head of a rat and a horse respectively. After walking a circle around the 2 statues, Duan Lingtian did not notice anything strange about them, so he no longer bothered with them and made his way to the staircase that led to a higher level. As soon as Duan Lingtian made his way to the staircase, something suddenly happened. Boom, boom, boom. An earthquake that seemed capable of toppling mountains suddenly appeared. Duan Lingtian felt his entire body sway along with the tower. Subsequently, 2 sounds akin to the sound of sky tearing resonated behind him. One of the sounds appeared particularly sneaky while the other sounded extremely fast. Whoosh! With just a flash of his body, Duan Lingtian disappeared from the spot he was previously standing at and emerged somewhere nearby. After he had moved away, he turned around in a timely manner and discovered the rat-faced human statue and that horse-faced human statue had somehow come alive. Moreover, they no longer stood opposite each other. Instead, they were joining forces to attack him. After the rat-faced human statue and the horse-faced human statue failed in their attacks, they immediately attacked again. The rat-faced human statue's attack was more sneaky while the horse-faced human statue's attack mostly relied on speed. These just happened to be the characteristics of a rat and a horse. However, they're just too weak, right? Under Duan Lingtian's strange pupil, the speed of the 2 statues that came alive was just too slow that it was pitiful. Duan Lingtian's estimated that they were at the early pristine saint stage at most. This was much weaker than the 3 wild beasts he came across outside the tower. Whoosh, whoosh, with just a thought, 2 golden sword rays that were as dazzling as the sun appeared. In just a blink of an eye, they directly impaled the 2 statues. After a while, they no longer could hold on and finally collapsed, forming 2 piles of broken stones. How weak! Duan Lingtian shook his head as he made his way to the staircase that led to the next floor. However, after this experience, he became more wary and alert. Although that was the case, he soon realized he had been too cautious. As he walked up to the second level of the tower, he did not encounter any obstacles at all. The second level of the tower was as empty as the first level. There was only a staircase leading up to the third level and another 2 statues. These 2 statues were also standing opposite each other in a confrontational pose similar to the statues on the first level. Cow-faced, sheep-faced. Soon after, Duan Lingtian discovered these 2 statues had the head of a cow and a sheep respectively. A cow-faced human and a sheep-faced human, it was a rat-faced human and a horse-faced human on the first floor. Moreover, they're standing in opposition to each other, cow and sheep. Rat and horse. Don't tell me, Duan Lingtian muttered to himself as his eyes suddenly brightened. Don't tell me it's actually the 6 harmonies. Duan Lingtian remembered when he was still on Earth in his past life, there was an ancient belief in that ancient Eastern country. The 6 harmonies was part of the belief. It described the opposition between the Chinese zodiac signs. There was a total of 12 Chinese zodiacs. 2 would always be in opposition with each other and form the 6 harmonies. This must be it. The first level was the cow and the sheep while the second level is a cow and a sheep. The rat opposes the horse while the cow opposes with sheep. If I'm not mistaken, the third level should be the tiger and the monkey, the fourth level should be the rabbit and the chicken, the fifth level should be the dragon and the dog, and the sixth level should be the snake and the pig. Duan Lingtian finally pieced the puzzle together. Looks like this tower contains the secret of the 6 harmonies, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. When Duan Lingtian regained his senses, he made his way to the staircase leading to the third level. At the same time, he successfully activated the 2 statues on the second level. The sheep-faced human statue and the cow-faced human statue. Compared to the two statues on the first level, these two statues' strength seemed to be a level higher. They were both at the intermediate pristine saint stage. However, in front of Duan Lingtian, there was no difference between the early and intermediate pristine saint stage. He could easily annihilate both of them. Just as Duan Lingtian had expected, he encountered a tiger-faced human statue and a monkey-faced human statue on the third level of the tower. Their strength was also a level higher. They were at the mastery pristine saint stage. On the fourth level of the tower, it was a rabbit-faced human statue and chicken-faced human statue. Both were at the peak of the pristine saint stage. On the fifth level of the tower, it was a dragon-faced human statue and a dog-faced human statue. Both were at the early refined saint stage. The snake-faced human statue and the pig-faced human statue on the sixth level of the tower were at the intermediate refined saint stage. When the two of them joined forces, even an ordinary intermediate refined saint stage martial cultivator might not necessarily be able to defeat them. However, they were nothing in front of Duan Lingtian. This is already the final level of the tower. Where's the divine ability relic? Duan Lingtian's heart pounded when he saw the snake-faced human statue and the pig-faced human statue had already crumbled into two piles of stones. As soon as this thought appeared in his mind, the air trembled as a gigantic statue walked out of thin air. A khaki light gleamed around its body that seemed as though it was as heavy as a mountain. What's this? Duan Lingtian was taken aback when he saw this. At this moment, the gigantic statue began to move. As heavy and clumsy as it looked, it was like a gust of wind when it moved. In just a blink of an eye, it arrived before Duan Lingtian before it lifted its gigantic leg and stomped on Duan Lingtian at lightning speed. If it was an ordinary person, he would definitely be smashed into a bloody mess after being stomped on like that. Faced with the gigantic statue's powerful stomp, Duan Lingtian did not retreat, but he charged forward instead. Both of his hands landed on the gigantic leg as all of the Sun True Origin in his body surged out unreservedly and gathered on his palms. In just a blink of an eye, both of Duan Lingtian's hands seemed to be granted with limitless strength. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Duan Lingtian's hands trembled before he subsequently took hold of that gigantic statue's leg and lifted it up abruptly. Like a windmill, he spun the statue around. In the end, as though he was done playing with it, Duan Lingtian let go of it and let it crash on the wall of the sixth level of the tower. Bang! Although there was a loud bang, the wall remained undamaged. Not only that, but the gigantic statue seemed to be intact as well. What a powerful defense! Upon seeing this, Duan Lingtian was greatly astonished. If he had thrown an ordinary mastery refined saint stage martial cultivator in this manner, he would have died if not crippled. However, this gigantic statue that possessed the strength of a mastery refined saint stage powerhouse was completely uninjured. The gigantic statue stood back up and charged at Duan Lingtian again. Big guy, eat my sword. Duan Lingtian snarled. With a raise of his hand, the Sun True Origin surged out of his palm and transformed into a 3-foot-long blade that was gleaming brightly with a golden light. Duan Lingtian's body was like a willow as his sword followed his movement. In just a short while, he appeared in front of the gigantic statue and slashed his sword at the gigantic statue's head at lightning speed. Clank! Duan Lingtian had thought he would be able to pierce the gigantic statue's head easily. However, he was proven wrong. The khaki light gleaming around the statue that was like a peerless defense easily blocked his sword. What a good fellow! Upon seeing this, Duan Lingtian was, naturally, dumbfounded. He began to notice that something was amiss. The khaki light on the surface of its body doesn't look as simple as just energy. It doesn't look like a defensive martial technique as well. Could this be a divine ability? Chapter 1770. If the khaki light around the gigantic statue's body was a defensive technique of the divine ability, then this divine ability must be absolutely wonderful. Although Duan Lingtian did not use all his might when he slashed at the statue earlier, it was still equivalent the entire strength of an ordinary martial cultivator at the peak of the refined saint stage. However, the strike had been blocked by a gigantic statue at the mastery refined saint stage instead. Naturally, Duan Lingtian had also noticed although the gigantic statue had blocked his attack, the khaki light around its body began to dim as well. Moreover, its body seemed to become heavier, and its speed was decreasing as well. It seems like this divine ability is powerful, but it depletes a lot of energy as well. When it blocked my sword earlier, it has almost used up its entire strength. Currently, it's like an arrow at the end of its flight. The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, he slashed his golden light sword again with a flick of his wrist. This time, he directly decapitated the gigantic statue's head. Crashed. Now that its head was shattered, the gigantic statue crashed on the ground and lost its vitality immediately. However, at the moment the gigantic statue collapsed, Duan Lingtian realized the place seemed to be vibrating again as a wave of dense aura shrouded the floor he was on in just an instant. The vibe it emitted was ancient, as though it had seen the vicissitudes of life. Soon after, Duan Lingtian's gaze landed on the space that was emitting the aura. There seemed to be a crack in the air. Inside that crack, a gigantic stone tablet appeared out of nowhere. The stone tablet descended on the ground, causing the entire tower to vibrate a little. The stone tablet laid on the ground, emitting an ancient vibe that was filled with the vicissitudes of life. It was as though it was trying to tell everything in its surroundings that it had existed for a long time. 6 Harmonies Golden Body. This is a divine ability. When Duan Lingtian's divine consciousness tried to probe the stone tablet, he noticed a message was sent back to him from the tablet. At this moment, he realized he was right about a divine ability relic being stored in the tower. This stone tablet was exactly one of the divine ability relics inside the St. Martial secret zone. Looks like everything I've gone through earlier was just a test before I'm able to obtain it. The defensive divine ability that the gigantic statue mastered is none other than this 6 Harmonies Golden Body. Although it's called the Golden Body, the divine ability's energy that covered the surface of the gigantic statue was khaki in color. Duan Lingtian also understood that it was exactly because the gigantic statue had activated the 6 Harmonies Golden Body that his first slash with his sword was unable to break its defense. Even if a person who's at the peak of the refined saint stage has cast the strongest defense in the earth-rank saint grade martial tactic, he would still be unable to defend against my sword earlier. The gigantic statue, on the other hand, managed to withstand it by only using the true origin at the mastery refined saint stage and the divine ability, the 6 Harmonies Golden Body. When Duan Lingtian recalled the scene earlier, he knew the divine ability, the 6 Harmonies Golden Body, was not something ordinary. Just when Duan Lingtian was about to memorize the 6 Harmonies Golden Body, he heard a commotion that caused him to snap back to reality. At the same time, he extended his divine consciousness and looked at the entrance of the staircase. After a span of more than 10 breaths, 3 figures walked in one after another. What's going on? There seemed to be 2 piles of stones on every floor. Does this place really contain the divine ability relic? The 3 young men who climbed up to the final floor of the tower discussed among themselves. Soon after, their eyes landed on the gigantic stone tablet in the distance. What's that? Could it be a divine ability relic? Somebody answered and 3 pairs of eyes lit up immediately. They instantly walked nearer so they could study the divine ability relic. We meet again. At this moment, an indifferent voice reverberated behind the 3 men suddenly. It was none other than Duan Lingtian who had somehow appeared behind them. Based on Duan Lingtian's words, it was as though he knew the 3 men before him. To be exact, it seemed as though he knew some of them. When 2 out of the 3 men heard this sentence from behind them, horror dawned on them immediately. Lingtian. They were no strangers to this voice. It was Lingtian's voice. He was the strongest person among the younger generations in the mystical Sky Mansion. It was also the Lingtian whom they had escaped from previously. That was right. 2 out of the 3 people were none other than Peng Sen and Hu Rui, the mystical palace's disciples who had seized the chance to run away when Duan Lingtian was chasing after Zhao Ji. It did not cross their minds that they would meet Duan Lingtian here. Lingtian. At the same time, the 3rd person finally turned around and looked at Duan Lingtian, who was standing nearby in shock. It was apparent he did not expect to meet Duan Lingtian here. Both of you, however, the man soon noticed Peng Sen and Hu Rui's faces that had turned pale as though they were afraid. His heart jolted immediately as a thought popped up in his mind. He immediately took a few steps back and distanced himself from the 2 men. After he had taken a few steps back, he hastily explained to Duan Lingtian, "Lingtian, I'm actually not that close to them. I'm a Yellow Palace's disciple. I just happened to pass by and was dragged along by them to explore this place." Duan Lingtian glanced at him indifferently before nodding. Then, he turned to look at Peng Sen and Hu Rui again. "How brave both of you are. To think you dare to disregard my words just like that." Peng Sen and Hu Rui lowered their heads and could not come up with any reply. Naturally, they were feeling extremely remorseful at this moment. If they had known Duan Lingtian would find this place just by knowing the general direction, they would not have escaped. Whoosh, whoosh. When Duan Lingtian saw the two of them keeping quiet, he was too lazy to talk to them anymore. With just a raise of his hand, two streaks of sword rays rapidly flew across the room and killed them. To be more exact, it killed their clones. At the instant when their clones were killed, both of their divine consciousness also returned to their bodies before they were kicked out by the Saint Martial's secret zone. Currently, only Duan Lingtian and that Yellow Palace's disciple were left on the highest level of the tower. You're not going to leave? Don't tell me you also want to leave together with them, Duan Lingtian asked as he glanced indifferently at the Yellow Palace's disciple. The Yellow Palace's disciple had long been scared by Duan Lingtian's earlier actions. He did not expect Duan Lingtian to decisively attack and send Peng Sen and the other man out. When he heard Duan Lingtian's words, he immediately snapped back to reality and hastily turned around to head downstairs. He only had one thought in his mind now, and it was to leave this place as soon as possible. He did not dare to think of the divine ability relic at all. With Lingtian here, he would not have a share at all even if it was a high-grade divine ability relic. After that Yellow Palace's disciple left, Duan Lingtian's divine consciousness merged with that gigantic stone tablet again, and he began to memorize the divine ability contained in it, the Six Harmonies Golden Body. When Duan Lingtian was memorizing the divine ability, the Six Harmonies Golden Body, the group of people outside the Saint Martial's secret zone noticed a commotion in the entrance of the Saint Martial's secret zone again. Soon after, they saw two people emerging from the entrance. Peng Sen, Hu Rui, why did you two come out as well? Upon seeing these two men, the palace master of Mystical Palace could not help but be taken aback. These two people were disciples from his mystical palace. Both of their cultivation base had already entered the peak of the pristine saint stage, and in terms of strength, they ranked at the top among the Mystical Palace's disciples at the peak of the pristine saint stage. However, they had been eliminated in just 3 days. They were only half a day later than Zhao Ji. Lord Palace Master, we were eliminated by Lingtian. Peng Sen and the other man smiled wryly. At the same time, they glanced at Zhao Ji who was standing nearby, and they did not feel too bad anymore. It was fortunate they were not the first one to be kicked out. Seeing another person who ranked the lowest, especially someone at the intermediate refined saint stage, they did not feel too sad even though they felt regretful for being eliminated. Lingtian again. Upon hearing Peng Sen's words, the place broke into an uproar again. What's that little fellow trying to do? The palace master of Mystical Palace looked at Peng Sen and the other man before asking in a deep voice, both of you have enmity with Lingtian as well. Lord Palace Master, before we entered the Saint Martial secret zone, we've never interacted with Lingtian before, Peng Sen replied bitterly. Then both of you, the Palace Master of Mystical Palace frowned immediately. He thought he had good judgment. Although he had only seen Lingtian before and had never interacted with him, he did not think he was someone who would create trouble for no reason. When Peng Sen saw the crowd's baffled expressions, he quickly recounted what had transpired between them and Lingtian, including how they had escaped when he was chasing after Zhao Ji. Both of you are really, how could you just abandon him and escape just like that? If it was someone else, they wouldn't have let both of you go as well. The Palace Master of Mystical Palace shook his head and did not blame Lingtian. If he was in Lingtian's shoes, he would have done the same thing as well. It was not only the strongest of the species that survived, but the quickest to act as well. This was the rule of survival. It's nature's selection. Peng Sen continued to tell them when they encountered Lingtian again, they saw a gigantic stone tablet that looked like a divine ability relic. What? When Zhao Deng heard Peng Sen's words, horror dawned on his face immediately. You mean, Lingtian has already obtained a divine ability relic? Zhao Ji who stood beside Zhao Deng had a terrible expression as well. He was kicked out by Lingtian only after 3 days of entering the Saint Martial secret zone. On the other hand, Lingtian had already obtained a divine ability relic so quickly. He hated it. He itched to shred Lingtian into thousands and thousands of pieces. That should be the case. Peng Sen nodded. After Peng Sen's confirmation, the crowd broke into an uproar again. It has only been 3 days, but Lingtian has already obtained a divine ability relic. I wonder what divine ability relic it is. Soon after, the Palace Master of Earth Palace looked at Peng Sen and the other man as he asked, Hey! Both of you, tell us the characteristics of the place that houses the divine ability relic. In the history of mystical Sky Mansion, whoever entered the St. Martial secret zone and obtained a divine ability relic would have to follow the mystical Sky Mansion's rules and reveal the process of how they obtained the divine ability relic. So many years had gone by, and the mystical Sky Mansion had also recorded quite many ways of obtaining various types of divine ability relics. If somebody went through the same process, they could use the record to deduce the type of divine ability that the divine ability relic contained. Chapter 1771. A 6-stories tower that one could only enter after one has killed 3 wild beasts that could coordinate their attacks. There are 2 piles of stones on every level. Other than the 2 piles of stones, there's also a gigantic statue on the 6th floor. And there's a stone table that might be a divine ability relic. The high-ranking officials present on the scene learned about 6 stories tower from Peng Sen in detail. If I remember correctly, it should be the 6 Harmonies Tower. The divine ability that Duan Lingtian obtained must be the 6 Harmonies Golden Body. In the end, Meng Qing, the mansion master, regained his senses first. He continued to say, although the 6 Harmonies Golden Body can't be considered as a high-grade divine ability, it's not weak as well. Among the divine abilities in the St. Martial secret zone, it would be ranked as a medium-grade divine ability. To think that it's a medium-grade divine ability. Everyone immediately broke into an uproar again. Initially, they had thought since Ling Tian had only entered the St. Martial secret zone for 3 days, it would be considered good enough if he found and obtained a low-grade divine ability relic and divine ability. They did not expect Ling Tian would find and obtain a medium-grade divine ability relic and divine ability. I've heard of the 6 Harmonies Golden Body before. It seems like it's a defensive divine ability. Qian Ping Shang, the palace master of Yellow Palace, chimed in. A medium-grade divine ability, damn it. After hearing that Duan Lingtian had obtained a medium-grade divine ability, Zhao Deng and his son's expressions turned even graver. Their hatred toward Duan Lingtian also grew a lot. Not bad, not bad. Zhu Luqi, the palace master of Heaven Palace, nodded his head in satisfaction. He was not stingy with his compliments. He has only entered the St. Martial secret zone 3 days ago, but he has already obtained a medium-grade divine ability. Standing by the side, Qi could not help but feel shocked as well since there were only a few people capable of accomplishing something like that after they had entered the St. Martial secret zone in the history of Azure Cloud Mansion. Although Duan Lingtian knew that news about him obtaining the divine ability from the divine ability relic he found would be spread out by Peng Sen and the other man, it did not cross his mind that based on Peng Sen's words, Meng Qing, the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion, would be able to deduce the divine ability contained in the divine ability relic he found was the 6 Harmonies Golden Body. This 6 Harmonies Golden Body could only be sensed but not explained. No wonder it's said that one can only try to comprehend and master it after breaking through to the Divine Saint stage. However, according to Elder Huo, I don't have to wait until I break through to the Divine Saint stage. I only need to break through to the Eminent Saint stage to comprehend divine abilities. Duan Lingtian knew his situation very well. As time passed, a day and a night went by. Duan Lingtian had also successfully memorized the 6 Harmonies Golden Body, including some information that could only be sensed but could not be explained. When Duan Lingtian withdrew his divine consciousness, he realized the gigantic stone tablet had already disappeared. Apart from that, the 6 Harmonies tower he was in and the formation that contained the tower disappeared as well. At this moment, he was back in the stone forest. He could no longer sense any formation in the stone forest. It was obvious the formations were all destroyed once he had memorized the 6 Harmonies Golden Body and completed the mission. I wonder what grade this divine ability, the 6 Harmonies Golden Body, that I obtained is. How good would it be if Elder Huo is here with me? He'll definitely know what grade the 6 Harmonies Golden Body is, Duan Lingtian muttered to himself as he left the stone forest. The most important thing now is to reunite with Wang Feizan and Lu Jian. I don't even know where they are or if they've already met one another. The St. Martial secret zone is so huge, I'm sure it won't be easy for me to meet them. More than 20 days had passed. Although Duan Lingtian encountered many people, he had yet to encounter Wang Feizan and Lu Jian. Naturally, during these 20 over days, he had gained some things as well. He had found another divine ability relic and memorized the divine ability in it. That divine ability was called the Flaming Clone. Although its name sounded quite powerful, based on Duan Lingtian's judgment, the grade was not as high as the 6 Harmonies Golden Body. Not only were the trials to obtain it much easier, but the content of the divine ability was easier to memorize as well. Duan Lingtian was not even certain if it would help much if he used it. There are only 2 months left. I hope I'll meet them as soon as possible. Duan Lingtian wandered around the St. Martial secret zone as he searched for traces of divine ability relics. During these 20 over days, although he came across many people, he did not attack them at all since he had no conflict with them. He did not have the thought that fewer people meant fewer competitors. Thus, he did not randomly attack everyone he met. When Duan Lingtian was passing through a dangerously steep barren mountain, he heard the sounds of fighting from the distant. However, the sound of fighting did not last too long before it finally came to a stop. Duan Lingtian curiously went over to the place. With just a glance, he saw 3 people surrounding one person. Duan Lingtian remembered the person who was being surrounded. He was a New Heaven Palace's disciple who entered the mystical sky mansion at the same time as him. However, they had never had any interactions before. The other 3 people were not Heaven Palace's disciples. Duan Lingtian raised a brow and decided to meddle when he saw the new disciple was forced into a corner by these 3 people. The reason was simple. It was because the person being surrounded was a Heaven Palace's disciple. One of the 3 people surrounding the Heaven Palace's disciple said, "We're from the Zhao clan. If you tell us where the divine ability relic is hidden, we'll owe you a favor. When we leave here, we'll inform Vice Mansion Master Zhao Deng about this and let you join our Zhao clan. If you join our Zhao clan, you'll be able to roam about freely in the mystical sky mansion. Boy, with your strength, it's useless even if you know where that place is. There's no way you'll pass the trials to obtain the divine ability relic. You might as well tell us, and the Zhao clan will owe you a favor," another person chimed in. Humph. A man is someone who knows how to recognize and adapt to a situation. If you don't want to be kicked out like your partner, you better obediently tell us what you know. Unlike the previous 2 men's soft approach, the third person immediately took the hard approach. Kicked out like my partner. That Heaven Palace's disciple did not panic although he was surrounded by the 3 men from the Zhao clan. Instead, he smirked coldly. Kick me out if you want. I really want to see how you're going to find that place after kicking me out. The 3 mystical sky mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan did not expect this Heaven Palace's disciple to be so audacious. Their expressions turned glum immediately. Soon after, one of the mystical sky mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan who had spoken earlier said again, "How about this? As long as you're willing to share the location of that place with us, we'll let you join our little team. When the 3 of us have found a divine ability relic each, we'll give the 4th divine ability relic to you." Based on his words, it was apparent he had decided to take a step back. Who knows if the 3 of you will go back on your words? When the Heaven Palace's disciples heard his words, the smirk on his face widened. What do you want then? The 3 mystical sky mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan began to get angry. Faced with this stubborn Heaven Palace's disciple, they really did not know what to do. Initially, they thought they could kill the chicken to frighten the monkey by eliminating his partner. However, it seemed like the method was completely useless. After thinking about it for a moment, the Heaven Palace's disciples replied irritatedly, "All right, I can join your little team, but I want the 2nd divine ability relic we encounter. Not only that, but all of you must swear by the lightning penalty oath, and no change of decision is allowed." No. When they heard his words, the 3 mystical sky mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan instantly refused his proposal in unison. "We can't give the 2nd divine ability relic to you, we can only give you the 3rd one at most. As for the lightning penalty oath, we agree to swear on it," one of the mystical sky mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan said. "This is the lowest we can go. If you're still unwilling to share with us, we'll have no choice but to eliminate you regardless if we can find that divine ability relic or not." The Heaven Palace's disciple's originally frowning face eased up immediately. As he was about to agree to it, a voice suddenly sounded and interrupted him. The Zhao clan. Upon hearing the voice, the Heaven Palace's disciple looked toward the source of the voice. With just a glance, they saw a tall and handsome approaching them from the distant sky. As he moved, he emitted a powerful aura that made others feel inferior. Senior brother Ling Tian. When Heaven Palace's disciple saw the person who had come, he cried out in delight. Ling Tian. Upon hearing the voice coming from their backs, the 3 mystical sky mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan who had yet to turn around paled when they heard the Heaven Palace's disciples' words. Ling Tian. Naturally, they were no strangers to this name. After all, this person had publicly slapped Zhao Ji twice and made himself a mortal enemy of the Zhao clan. The three of them turned around and looked at Ling Tian, who was making his way over with a grave expression. Hints of dread could be seen in their eyes as panic filled their hearts. Duan Ling Tian came to a halt in front of the three mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan. He looked at them coldly and asked, "Do you know where Zhao Ji is?" "No, we don't, Senior Brother Ling Tian, we've no idea where Senior Brother Zhao Ji is." The three of them thought Duan Ling Tian was looking for Zhao Ji, so they quickly replied truthfully, "Senior Brother Ling Tian, we're not lying to you. We really don't know where Senior Brother Zhao Ji is at this moment. If we know, we'll definitely join him since there's strength in numbers in the Saint Martial secret zone." Upon hearing their words, Duan Ling Tian was rendered speechless. They had misunderstood the meaning of his words. "I'm not really asking where Zhao Ji is." Duan Ling Tian's gaze turned slightly cold. "I'm just trying to tell three of you that Zhao Ji's already waiting for three of you outside." Chapter 1772. Upon hearing Duan Ling Tian's words, the three mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan finally understood Duan Ling Tian's words, no matter how slow-witted they were. Horror dawned on their faces immediately. "Ling Tian, why you've killed Senior Brother Zhao Ji's clone?" When the mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan looked at Duan Ling Tian again, terror could be seen in their eyes. Despite knowing Ling Tian and Zhao Ji had enmity between them, it did not cross their minds he would dare to kill Zhao Ji in the Saint Martial secret zone. In fact, the strongest mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan who entered the Saint Martial secret zone this time was Zhao Ji. In the Zhao clan, Zhao Ji was the person with the highest chance to obtain a high-grade divine ability relic and break through to the divine saint stage. It would allow him to comprehend and master the divine ability contained inside the divine ability relic. Killing and eliminating Zhao Ji meant that the Zhao clan had lost a divine saint stage powerhouse who could comprehend and master a divine ability from the Saint Martial secret zone. This was undoubtedly a great loss to the Zhao clan. "I remember I encountered him on the third day we came in. Since we're fated to meet, wouldn't it be unkind of me if I don't send him out?" Duan Ling Tian replied nonchalantly as though he was talking about something that was unrelated to him. After that, Heaven Palace's disciple who was being surrounded heard Duan Ling Tian said that he had sent Zhao Ji out, a shocked expression appeared on his face. Although he knew about Ling Tian and Zhao Ji's dispute, it did not cross his mind that Ling Tian was bold enough to directly kill Zhao Ji's clone. He was even more shocked when Duan Ling Tian's words sank in. Zhao Ji was eliminated on the third day after entering the Saint Martial secret zone. Zhao Ji is just too unlucky, right? The Heaven Palace's disciple was rendered speechless. At the same time, he could not help but pity him as well. 3 days. Although the three mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan already knew Duan Ling Tian had eliminated Zhao Ji, they were still shocked when they heard his words. Originally, they had thought Zhao Ji was only eliminated by Duan Ling Tian a few days ago. They did not expect that Zhao Ji was eliminated 3 days after he came in. Just how unlucky was he? Thinking of the word unlucky, three of them exchanged glances with each other. They could see they were all thinking about the same thing. Speaking of unlucky, were they not unlucky as well? They knew they would be eliminated by Ling Tian soon. "Let's flee. Although the chance is slim, it's better than to stand here and wait for death." "I agree. Let's flee. Flee." Soon after, the three mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan transmitted their voices to each other and came to a tacit agreement. At this moment, they had completely thrown the Heaven Palace's disciple they were cornering to the back of their minds. Only one thought was left in their minds, and it was to escape from Ling Tian. The weakest among the mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan was at the peak of the pristine saint stage, while the other two more powerful ones were at the early refined saint stage. After coming to an agreement, one of them counted down through voice transmission. The three of them simultaneously made their moves and fled in 3 different directions. Only then would they stand a chance in escaping. Even if only one of them managed to escape, it was still better than having the entire army wiped out. They did not even think of pleading with Duan Ling Tian. Even Zhao Ji from their Zhao clan had already been killed and eliminated by Ling Tian. Even if 3 of them lowered themselves and kneeled down to plead for their lives, they would still be killed. Since this was the case, was it not better to try and escape? Zhao Ji did not even manage to flee from my grasp. Do 3 of you think you're stronger than him? Duan Ling Tian was already prepared. The sun true origin was glowing on his skin. When he saw those three escaped in three different directions, he instantly activated the sun true origin that was enveloping the surface of his body and transformed it into 6 streaks of golden rays that shot out dazzlingly in all directions. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Those three who had fled not far away was caught up by the 6 streaks of sword rays that were as dazzling as the sun as it landed on them. The place between their brows and their hearts were pierced. The 3 figures vanished immediately. Gasp. Although the Heaven Palace's disciples had already expected such an outcome, he still could not help but gasp as he stood at his spot. Among the younger generation in the mystical Sky Mansion, it was very likely that only this man could kill 2 early refined saint stage martial cultivators and a martial cultivator at the peak of the pristine saint stage with just a raise of his hand. After killing the 3 mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan, Duan Lingtian's face began to ease up. When he had slapped Zhao Ji twice publicly, the enmity between him and the Zhao clan had long been formed. Moreover, it had also reached a point of no return. Was there a way to return to how it was before? Zhao Ji's father, Zhao Dang, was the vice mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion, and his grandfather was even one of the 2 great guardians of the Mystical Sky Mansion. These 2 close relatives of his were leaders with the highest positions in the Zhao clan. Since he had offended Zhao Ji, it was equivalent to offending the Zhao clan as well. Duan Lingtian knew this clearly. That was why he did not even hesitate when he killed Zhao Ji previously and the 3 mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan earlier. Since he had already offended them, he did not mind offending them further. After nodding toward the Heaven Palace's disciple as a greeting, Duan Lingtian turned around to leave. The Heaven Palace's disciple was stunned when he saw this. He had thought of many possible scenarios, but it did not cross his mind that Duan Lingtian did not even say a word and would leave after saving him by killing the 3 mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan. Did he not hear the conversation between him and the people from the Zhao clan? Did he not know he had the clues that lead to a divine ability relic? He thought about it again and found it impossible. From Duan Lingtian's calm manner earlier, it was apparent he was biding his time at the side for a long time, so he must have heard their conversation. Since Lingtian was leaving, it was obvious he did not plan to force him to reveal the clues he had leading to the divine ability relic. The Heaven Palace's disciple had guessed correctly. Although Duan Lingtian did not mind snatching clues that led to divine ability relics from disciples of other palaces, he did not have the heart to snatch clues from Heaven Palace's disciples. No matter what, he was also a Heaven Palace's disciple and had reaped benefits from the Heaven Palace's spirit pool. He felt a sense of belonging to the Heaven Palace. Senior brother Lingtian, seeing how Duan Lingtian was leaving further and further away, the Heaven Palace's disciple became anxious and immediately chased after him. Is there anything else? When Duan Lingtian heard his voice, he came to a halt and turned around to look at the Heaven Palace's disciple with a puzzled expression. After taking a deep breath to calm himself down, he replied, "Senior brother Lingtian, I want to work together with you." "Work with me?" Duan Lingtian smiled. "I heard earlier that you have clues leading to one divine ability relic. Even if we manage to pass the trials, it'll be a problem later to decide who gets to memorize divine ability first. It'll be fine if I haven't agreed to partner up with other people, since we can look for other clues for other divine ability relics for the other person. However, the problem is, I've already agreed to work with other people. I'm worried I'll encounter them before we manage to find a second divine ability relic." Duan Lingtian added, "I promised one of them to give them the first divine ability relic we encounter once we reunite." "Senior brother Lingtian, the fact that you said such words means that you're a man of your words. I, Xiaodun, admire you lot," the Heaven Palace's disciple said with admiration. Then, he shifted the topic and continued to say, "However, the clues I have lead to not only one, but 2 divine ability relics. If you work with me, senior brother Lingtian, how about we split the divine ability relics?" After he had finished speaking, he looked at Duan Lingtian with anticipation. 2 divine ability relics. Upon hearing his words, Duan Lingtian was taken aback. He did not expect Xiaodun, who was only at the peak of the pristine saint stage, managed to find clues leading to 2 divine ability relics in just a month after entering the Saint Martial secret zone. "Yes," Xiaodun nodded. Then, as though he was reminded of something, he let out a long sigh. "Actually, the 2 divine ability relics were found by my friend. He has cultivated a secret tactic that's related to the eyes. His vision is better than ordinary people. Due to that, he could find clues leading to 2 divine ability relics in just a month. Unfortunately, just as he was about to find another divine ability relic so that we can search for another person at the refined saint stage to work with to go through the trials, we encountered those 3 men who killed him. When Xiao Dun reached the end of his sentence, a regretful expression could be seen on his face. That's indeed quite a pity. Duan Lingtian nodded. He was quite shocked. Even he only managed to obtain 2 divine abilities after entering the Saint Martial secret zone for a month. Although Xiao Dun's friend did not obtain the divine ability, he managed to find clues leading to 2 divine ability relics. His luck was in no way inferior to his own. I wonder what grade the divine abilities inside the 2 divine ability relics are. Duan Lingtian was very curious about this. For a moment, he seemed to have forgotten to agree to Xiao Dun's request of working together. Senior brother Lingtian. Duan Lingtian finally snapped back to reality when Xiao Dun spoke again. I can partner up with you, but how should we split the divine ability relics? I'll tell you about the information I have of the places where the 2 divine ability relics are. Senior brother Lingtian. Xiao Dun did not keep anything to himself and revealed everything he knew. The 2 divine ability relics were similar to the ones Duan Lingtian had encountered previously. One would need to enter it through an illusory formation, and after one had entered, one would have to face the first trial. The first trial of the first divine ability relic that Duan Lingtian encountered was slightly more difficult. For this reason, the divine ability he obtained was at a higher grade as well. From Xiao Dun's description, the first trial of the 2 divine abilities he encountered was as difficult as the divine ability relic that contained the divine ability, the 6 Harmonies Golden Body. It was apparent the divine abilities contained in the 2 divine ability relics were in no way inferior to the 6 Harmonies Golden Body. Your friend's quite lucky. Duan Lingtian sighed emotionally. Chapter 1773. 3 people appeared once again at the entrance of the Saint Martial secret zone. Why are 3 of you here? When Zhao Deng saw the 3 men who came out, his expression turned grim immediately since these 3 men belonged to the Zhao clan. In fact, there were only 5 men from the Zhao clan who had entered this time, including Zhao Ji. However, 4 people had been kicked out in just a span of a month. Upon seeing Zhao Deng, whose expression had turned grave, the 3 mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan had a bitter expression on their faces. They could not help but curse inwardly. If it's not because your son has offended him, we wouldn't have been kicked out. Nobody could blame them for having such thoughts. Although they were mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan, they never had any interaction with Duan Lingtian before, let alone offending him. The reason Duan Lingtian killed their clones and sent them out from the Saint Martial secret zone was all due to their backgrounds. Apart from being mystical Sky Mansion's disciples, they were from the Zhao clan as well. Faced with Zhao Deng's grave expression, one of the mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan finally mustered up his courage and replied, our 3 clones were killed by Lingtian. He's just too powerful, and we're completely powerless in front of him. Lingtian again. Upon hearing his words, many people present on the scene shifted their eyes that contained hints of pity to Zhao Deng. Him again, Zhao Ji exclaimed in a deep voice. He seemed to have forgotten himself again. His eyes gleamed fiercely, and killing intent could be seen in them as well. At the same time, a young man beside the palace master of Earth Palace whispered to him, Lord Mansion Master, they were the ones who killed me and kicked me out. Hints of delight could be seen in his eyes as he gloated over their misfortune. This young man was the mystical Sky Mansion's disciple who was with Xiao Dun previously. The 2 divine ability relics that Xiao Dun knew about was discovered by this young man. After he had discovered the 2 divine ability relics, before he even had a chance to explore the places, he had already been eliminated. One could just imagine how frustrated he was. However, currently, when he saw the 3 mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan who had eliminated him were also eliminated not long after he had been eliminated, he was beside himself with joy. All the frustration he felt in his heart had also vanished without a trace. The palace master of Earth Palace nodded. What a pity the 2 divine ability relics you've discovered have gone to waste. That Heaven Palace's disciple has really lucked out, seeing how 3 of them are kicked out not long after you came out. I think Lingtian must have made his move and rescued that Heaven Palace's disciple. I think so too, the young man nodded. At the same time, he sighed in relief. His eyes contained hints of envy but not jealousy. This was because he and Xiao Dun, the Heaven Palace's disciple, were both good friends who had known each other before entering the mystical Sky Mansion. After discovering Xiao Dun was unharmed, he heaved a sigh of relief instead. Damn it, That divine ability relic is going to end up in Ling Tian's possession again. Zhao Dang was boiling with anger. One could imagine if Duan Ling Tian was right in front of him, he would not hesitate to kill him at all. When Zhao Dang and his son were still boiling with anger to the point of almost passing out, the young man standing next to the palace master of Earth Palace looked at the three Zhao clan's disciples and feigned a pitiful sigh as he said, "It seems like some people are destined to miss the 2 divine ability relics that I discovered." "What did you say? 2 divine ability relics? Both of you discovered 2 divine ability relics?" At once, the 3 Zhao clan's disciples widened their eyes and looked at the young man, the Earth Palace's disciple whose clone was killed and eliminated by the 3 of them, with disbelief. "I've already been kicked out. Is there a need for me to lie? I think senior brother Ling Tian and Xiao Dun must be on their way to get the 2 divine ability relics now," the Earth Palace's disciple replied indifferently. Based on the tone of his voice, he was taking pleasure in their misfortune. The 3 Zhao clan's disciples were dumbfounded. 2 divine ability relics had escaped them just like that. 2 divine ability relics. Many eyes immediately shifted again to look at Zhao Dang, who was so furious until his body was trembling slightly when he heard the Earth Palace's disciples' words. "How's this possible? What did Ling Tian do to have such good luck?" Zhao Ji's eyes were bloodshot while an expression of discontentment appeared on his face. "Ling Tian's really lucky." Qian Ping Sheng, the palace master of Yellow Palace, could not help but sigh. Indeed, many people agreed. "Haha, junior brother Ling Tian's really quite unpredictable." Ji Yu Li laughed. "Ling Tian's really quite lucky, I wonder if he's our young mansion master or not." Standing by the side, Ku Mi appeared calm, but his heart was a different story. Meanwhile, in the Saint Martial's secret zone, Duan Ling Tian looked at Xiao Dun and said, "According to you, the first trial of the 2 divine ability relics have almost the same level of difficulty. Based on this, it's very likely the divine abilities should be about the same grade. Since you're the one who provided the information about the divine ability relics, you can take your pick first." Since they were about the same, Duan Ling Tian did not make a fuss about it. Xiao Dun looked at Duan Ling Tian and asked carefully, "See, can I choose the one in the palace?" There was a hint of anxiousness in the depth of his gaze. After taking a deep look at Xiao Dun, who was waiting anxiously, Duan Ling Tian finally nodded. "Sure." Although the level of difficulty for the first trials of the 2 divine ability relics was about the same, the locations of the 2 relics were on opposite sides of each other. One of the divine ability relics was located in a magnificent palace. That was where Xiao Dun and his friend failed the first trial. The other divine ability relic was located in a gloomy and dark swamp. It was completely opposite from the former one. Although the first trials for these 2 places were about the same in terms of difficulty, most ordinary people would choose the former since the place was more majestic. The divine ability contained in the divine ability relic should not be simple as well. If Duan Ling Tian were to pick first, he would also instinctively pick the former. However, since Xiao Dun had already picked one, he did not say anything since Xiao Dun was the one who had provided the information leading to the 2 divine ability relics. "Then, let's get the divine ability relic that you've picked first. After you've memorized the divine ability contained in it, you can bring me to the location of the second divine ability relic. I'll explore the location of the second divine ability relic on my own so you can go on and search for another divine ability relic. That way, you won't have to waste your time," Duan Ling Tian told Xiao Dun. "Senior brother Ling Tian, you trust me so much." Xiao Dun was slightly taken aback by Duan Ling Tian's plan. Initially, he had thought Duan Ling Tian would want to go to the swamp first to memorize the divine ability, but it did not cross his mind that Duan Ling Tian would help him to obtain his divine ability relic first. "We're all Heaven Palace's disciples, so there's nothing to not trust," Duan Ling Tian said casually. However, when Xiao Dun heard this, he felt so ashamed he wished the ground would swallow him up. In fact, he had been slightly selfish by picking the divine ability relic located in the palace. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Dun made his decision and said, "Senior brother Ling Tian, maybe we should switch our divine ability relics. Even if the divine ability relic hidden in the palace has the same grade as the one in the swamp, I still think the one in the palace will be better." The fact that you said such words means you're sincere enough. However, since we've already made a decision, there's no need for us to change it. The divine ability relic in the palace will be yours, Duan Ling Tian replied, "Just lead the way." After he asked Xiao Dun to lead the way, he followed behind Xiao Dun as they made their way to the first divine ability relic. A day and a night had passed as Duan Lingtian followed Xiaodun into a vast grassland before they finally came to a halt in front of a huge lake. The entrance is in the lake. Duan Lingtian raised his brow, astonished. Yes, Xiaodun nodded before making his way in first. He entered the lake as adept as a fish. Duan Lingtian followed suit. Since their cultivation bases had reached a certain level, entering a lake was as easy as traveling on land. With the true origin enveloping them, they blocked the water out completely. When they were nearing the bottom of the lake, Duan Lingtian noticed the ripples from a formation. As they entered deeper into the lake, Duan Lingtian realized Xiaodun had disappeared before his eyes. As he went deeper, his vision turned black. When light appeared again, Duan Lingtian regained his senses and discovered he was in another place. This place appeared dignified. A palace could be seen in front like a gigantic beast lying prone on the ground. It was exactly like what Xiaodun had described earlier. Senior brother Lingtian, there are 5 flying-type fierce beasts guarding the entrance of the palace, and their strength is at the peak of the pristine saint stage. At this moment, Xiaodun's voice entered Duan Lingtian's ears. The 5 flying-type fierce beasts are of different species, so all their techniques are different as well. Previously, when we came here, we were almost killed. Based on our previous estimation, we needed at least 3 people at the peak of the pristine saint stage to kill them before we can enter the palace. However, someone at the refined saint stage or above should be able to kill them all by just relying on their strength. When Xiaodun reached the end of his sentence, he looked at Duan Lingtian with a burning gaze. Duan Lingtian was someone at the refined saint stage or above. Moreover, he was not an ordinary refined saint stage powerhouse. All right, Duan Lingtian nodded before making his move. Like a bolt of lightning, he charged out and made his way to the palace. At this moment, the entrance to the palace was tightly shut. When Duan Lingtian was halfway there, a few sharp cries resonated in the distance. Subsequently, 5 gigantic figures appeared out of thin air above the palace. Chapter 1774. The 5 gigantic figures were the 5 flying-type fierce beasts that Xiaodun had described earlier. The 5 flying-type fierce beasts were all different. Some looked terrifying while some looked rather pleasant. There was even an almost bald bird that did not have many feathers on its body. The only similarity they shared was they were all birds. Along with a few ear-piercing cries, the 5 flying-type wild beasts charged at Duan Lingtian immediately at a speed so fast that it resembled 5 bolts of lightning. Just some stray birds. How dare you act almighty in front of me? Faced with the 5 menacing flying-type fierce beasts, Duan Lingtian snorted coldly in disdain. In the next instant, without too many actions, the Sun True Origin surged out of his body and transformed into streaks of sword rays that rapidly whirled around his body before it transformed again into a gigantic bell. It was none other than the colossal sword bell that Duan Lingtian created based on the colossal arrow bell. Boom, 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 comma. One must admit that the attacks from the 5 flying-type fierce beasts that were at the peak of the pristine saint stage were incredibly powerful. Every time they attacked, it would make the air tremble. When the attacks landed on the colossal sword bell, it caused the latter to shake as well. Although it shook, it showed no signs of crumbling at all. How powerful! In the distant, Xiaodun was dumbfounded. Although he knew this senior brother Lingtian was very powerful, he was still shocked when he witnessed Duan Lingtian's strength with his own eyes. To think that he and his friend were chased by these 5 stray birds previously. However, when it was senior brother Lingtian's turn, the situation had completely turned around. Senior brother Lingtian merely cast a defensive technique and that 5 stray birds could not even break his defense at all no matter how much they tried with all their might. How weak, this is so boring. Seeing how the 5 flying-type fierce beasts could not break his colossal sword bell no matter how much they tried, Duan Lingtian felt disappointed. With just a thought, the colossal sword bell disappeared while hundreds of sword rays that formed the colossal sword bell shot toward the 5 flying-type fierce beasts instantly. Whoosh, 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 comma. In just an instant, it seemed as though it was raining swords. However, instead of falling vertically like rains, the swords were moving horizontally. The swords covered the sky and set off a series of ear-piercing sounds. It seemed as though the sky was about to tear in their wake. The 5 flying-type fierce beasts vanished after being baptized by the rain of swords. They're like the 3 fierce beasts at the entrance of the tower. Upon seeing this, Duan Lingtian's heart leapt slightly as he recalled the 6 Harmonies tower that housed the divine ability relic that contained the 6 Harmonies golden body. You're reading on BOXNO versus EL.com. Thanks. Although there were only 3 fierce beasts guarding the entrance of the 6 Harmonies Tower, their joint attacks were in no way inferior to the 5 flying-type fierce beasts since the former were able to coordinate their attacks. Rumble. When the 5 flying-type fierce beasts were killed, the great entrance to the palace finally opened. As expected, it's indeed the same as the 6 Harmonies Tower, Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Since the entrance had already opened, naturally, he would enter it. Duan Lingtian did not stop and immediately entered the palace. Xiao Dun followed closely as he watched Duan Lingtian's silhouette with enthusiasm in his eyes. After they entered the palace, Duan Lingtian realized the trials were similar to the trials in the 6 Harmonies Tower. Naturally, what he meant by similar was the difficulties increased level by level. Similarly, each of the opponents he faced was stronger than the previous ones. As they were moving through the palace, Xiao Dun's gaze became even more heated as he looked at Duan Lingtian. There was no need for him to do anything at all. To be more exact, he had no chance to do anything at all. Senior brother Lingtian was just too fast when he dealt with the trials they encountered. Naturally, Xiao Dun would not even be able to pass if he made a move during the later trials. Duan Lingtian, who was walking in the hallway of the palace, suddenly came to a halt as he said to Xiao Dun as he looked ahead, "There's only one hall left in front. If I'm not mistaken, the divine ability relic should be inside." Upon hearing that, Xiao Dun raised his head and looked at the palace's last big hall that they had yet to enter. There was a plaque above the entrance of the big hall that was carved elegantly with 3 words. Rock Heaven Hall. The 3 words subtly emitted a sense of pressure as though there was some special force contained inside. Divine Ability Relic. Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, Xiao Dun became slightly excited since he would be able to obtain a Divine Ability Relic soon. Although it was uncertain if he would be able to master it in the future, having a shot at it was better than none at all. Moreover, based on the trials they encountered along the way, he was certain this Divine Ability Relic would not be a low-grade one. Although he had entered the mystical sky mansion quite late, he had also heard that the more difficult the trials were, the divine ability relics were most likely of a higher grade. Due to this reason, Xiao Dun was excited. He looked forward to seeing what kind of divine ability was contained in the divine ability relic inside the Rock Heaven Hall. Before they entered, Duan Lingtian reminded Xiao Dun, "After we enter, don't leave my side. If I'm not mistaken, there should one last trial in there." With his experience from the 6 Harmonies Tower, he believed there would still be a trial awaiting him in the Rock Heaven Hall. It was because a presence that was similar to the gigantic statue in the 6 Harmonies Tower had yet to appear in this palace. Alright, senior brother Lingtian. Throughout their journey, Xiao Dun had already regarded Duan Lingtian as a deity. It was only natural for him to trust Duan Lingtian's words unconditionally. "Let's go in." After Duan Lingtian heard Xiao Dun's reply, he did not waste any more time and strode into the Rock Heaven Hall. Although the name Rock Heaven Hall sounded quite nice, when Duan Lingtian entered the hall, he discovered the hall was unlike the other halls in the palace. There was nothing in the Rock Heaven Hall other than countless irregular rocks. In fact, the big halls he had gone through before this were all magnificent. However, this Rock Heaven Hall looked extremely rundown and ugly. Duan Lingtian was not the only one who was dumbfounded. Even Xiao Dun was dumbstruck as he muttered, "Senior brother Lingtian, are we really still in the palace? Why do I feel like we've entered the wrong room?" Entered the wrong room. Indeed, Duan Lingtian felt the same way. However, the baffled expression on his face disappeared and was replaced by a solemn expression. Duan Lingtian's gaze soon landed on the countless of irregular rocks. He was shocked. These rocks are originally inanimate. However, currently, it feels like they're filling up with vitality. What are they? Duan Lingtian obtained this information from his divine consciousness. Senior brother Lingtian, these rocks seem a little weird. At the same time, Xiao Dun also noticed the rocks on the floor was strange. Bang! As soon as Xiao Dun's words left his mouth, a loud bang resonated from behind Duan Lingtian. He instinctively turned around and discovered the only exit of Rock Heaven Hall was blocked by a rock door, effectively trapping him and Xiao Dun inside. Unlike Duan Lingtian, who remained calm, horror dawned on Xiao Dun. Whoosh, 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 comma. At this moment, the air in the Rock Heaven Hall, that was closed tightly, began to stir as gusts of wind began to blow. Initially, the wind was quite mild. However, in the end, it turned as fierce as a hurricane as it blew at Duan Lingtian and Xiao Dun, causing their robes to flutter loudly. Senior brother Ling Tian, the rocks seem to be moving. Xiao Dun suddenly cried out with a trembling voice. Duan Ling Tian nodded. He had noticed it as well. As the hurricane continued to wreak havoc in the Rock Heaven Hall, the rocks on the floor began to tremble as well. Initially, only those small rocks shook, but in the end, even those rocks that could be considered as gigantic began to shake violently as well. Soon after, both of them discovered some of the smaller rocks had already flown up into the air and were continuously gaining height. Gradually, the remaining rocks began to rise up into the air as well. Under the watchful eyes of Duan Ling Tian and Xiao Dun, when all of the rocks rose up into the air, they actually merged into a rock golem that was as big as a small mountain. The rock golem did not have eyes or mouth. However, its vitality resembled that of a fierce beast. It was not just for decoration. Boom! Without warning, the rock golem moved. As it lifted a leg and dropped it on the ground, it caused dust to fly in the air. The entire Rock Heaven Hall quaked as though an earthquake had just taken place. Boom, 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 the rock golem took a few strides forward again and caused the Rock Heaven Hall to shake violently. Even Duan Ling Tian and Xiao Dun began to sway from the effect. Boom, 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 boom. After a few steps, both of them realized the rock golem's speed had increased. Initially, it was just walking, then it began to gain speed and was currently charging at them with ever-increasing speed. At the same time, the aura the rock golem emitted began to intensify as well. Its aura crashed at them like waves, almost suffocating Xiao Dun. As for Duan Ling Tian, he was not affected at all. Xiao Dun, whose face was flushed from anxiety, rose up into the air and hastily reminded Duan Ling Tian, "Be careful, senior brother Ling Tian." However, Duan Ling Tian did not seem to hear him at all. To be exact, he was ignoring him. He charged toward the rock golem whose speed was still increasing. His palm had somehow shot out Sun True Origin that transformed into a dazzling golden 3-foot-long blade. After the rock golem's aura became stable, Duan Ling Tian thought to himself, "The aura on the rock golem has finally stabilized, mastery refined saint stage. It's the same as the gigantic puppet on the final level of the 6 Harmonies Tower. I'd like to see whether you can withstand a casual strike of my sword like that gigantic puppet or not." His heart leapt as he abruptly pounced forward like a bolt of lightning. The tip of the 3-foot-long blade was pointed at the rock golem. Chapter 1775. Originally, Duan Ling Tian had just casually said that. However, when his sword hit the rock golem, the outer layer of skin on the rock golem blocked his sword. In fact, the force of his sword was equivalent to the full strength of an ordinary martial cultivator at the peak of the refined saint stage. This familiar scene made Duan Ling Tian dumbstruck as well. Previously, when he was in the 6 Harmonies Tower, the gigantic statue had used the divine ability, the 6 Harmonies Golden Body, to block his sword. However, the rock golem had withstood his sword with his body alone. How could he not feel astonished? Wait a minute. Soon after, Duan Ling Tian noticed something was amiss. When his gaze landed on the rock golem again, he realized the rock golem's outer skin had begun to crack as though it was shedding its skin. The outer layer of skin turned into dust and scattered in the wind as though it was never there. At the same time, Duan Ling Tian's divine consciousness could clearly sense that the rock golem's aura had suddenly weakened a little as though its strength had depleted. The layer of outer skin was not part of his body. Could this also be a divine ability? The scene before him was similar to what had happened in the last level of the 6 Harmonies Tower. When he had damaged the gigantic statue's 6 Harmonies Golden Body, the gigantic statue's aura had also weakened a little. Then, it was subsequently destroyed by him due to the depletion of its energy. The rock golem before him was the same as well. After its outer skin cracked and turned into dust, it had depleted its energy. Bang! As Duan Ling Tian pushed out his palm on the rock golem that was charging toward him, his Sun True Origin surged violently into the rock golem's body. At this instant, the rock golem trembled. Its energy that was already depleting was suppressed before its body was destroyed by the Sun True Origin. In the end, the rock golem turned into rocks again. However, after it had transformed into rocks, it transformed into dust that covered the entire place. It rose with the wind before it settled in the Rock Heaven Hall. The dust transformed back into dust while the earth transformed back into earth. Upon seeing this, Xiao Dun, who was hovering nearby, was dumbstruck. That's all. However, in the next instant, his expression turned grave again. The divine consciousness he released detected a tremble in the air. After the rock golem was destroyed, the air seemed to stir again. The rock golem earlier was already so ridiculously strong, please don't tell me there's an even stronger one. The moment he thought of this, he frowned. It was fortunate he came with Duan Ling Tian. Otherwise, even if he managed to get himself more helpers, he would not have been able to pass the rock golem trial. The divine ability relic is going to reveal itself soon. If I'm not mistaken, the divine ability contained inside should be quite a powerful defensive divine ability. At this moment, Duan Ling Tian spoke as his voice clearly entered Xiaodun's ears. The divine ability relic was going to reveal itself soon. A defensive divine ability. Where's it? Xiao Duan was looking left and right when he noticed a crack in the air. Subsequently, a gigantic stone tablet appeared from inside before it dropped on the ground with a loud bang in the Rock Heaven Hall. Memorize it, I'll wait for you, Duan Ling Tian said to Xiaodun before he sat down at the side and shut his eyes to attain mental composure. After taking a deep breath, Xiaodun suppressed the excitement in his heart and quickly thanked Duan Ling Tian. Thank you, senior brother Ling Tian. If it was not for Duan Ling Tian's help today, he would not have been able to touch the divine ability relic even if he knew the location of the divine ability relic. When he recalled the trials they went through earlier, fear still lingered in his heart. It's really a defensive divine ability. Initially, Xiaodun did not pay too much attention to Duan Ling Tian's words since the divine ability relic had not appeared yet. By right, no one would know what kind of divine ability it was. However, when he extended his divine consciousness into the stone tablet, he discovered it was indeed a defensive divine ability. Rock Heaven Wall. The divine ability contained inside the stone tablet was called the Rock Heaven Hall. It was a defensive divine ability. To be honest, Xiaodun was a little disappointed that he obtained a defensive divine ability. After all, the spear and shield had always been on opposite sides in this world. In the Dao Martial Saint Land, martial and Dao cultivators who had the same level of cultivation base and had cultivated the same level of offensive and defensive technique respectively, the spear would usually be able to break the shield even though the process was slightly harder. For this reason, Xiaodun wanted an offensive divine ability more. How good would it be if I chose the other divine ability relic? The moment such a thought appeared in his mind, he dismissed it. What am I thinking? If it wasn't for senior brother Ling Tian's help, it would have been impossible for me to obtain a divine ability even if I know where the divine ability relic is. Not only that, but I'm the one who picked this divine ability relic first. The moment he thought of this, his face flushed. And I don't even know whether the divine ability contained in the other divine ability relic is a defensive divine ability or not. Even if it's not, senior brother Ling Tian more than deserves it. When Xiaodun's thoughts reached here, he became more open-minded and immersed his entire heart and soul into the stone tablet that contained the divine ability. What a marvelous defensive divine ability. Even if this defensive divine ability is not a high-grade divine ability, it could be considered as a medium-grade divine ability, right? The more he understood the Rock Heaven Wall, the more shocked Xiaodun was. From the description of the Rock Heaven Wall, it was definitely not a low-grade divine ability. After a day and a night, Duan Ling Tian opened his eyes. He's still not done. Due to the fact that it only took him a day and a night to memorize the contents of the divine ability, the Six Harmonies Golden Body, Duan Ling Tian had thought Xiaodun would also be able to memorize everything in one day and one night. However, he realized he was mistaken. Based on the trials we went through to obtain this divine ability relic, the defensive divine ability relic that Xiaodun obtained should be at the same level as the Six Harmonies Golden Body. Since it's a defensive divine ability, I don't need it at all. I wonder what kind of divine ability is contained in the other divine ability relic that's located in the deepest part of the swamp. Unknowingly, Duan Ling Tian had begun to look forward to seeing the divine ability relic located in the swamp. I hope it's an offensive divine ability, Duan Ling Tian thought to himself. Currently, he already had a defensive divine ability, the Six Harmonies Golden Body. Coupled with the golden crow's wings that Elder Huo had passed on to him, he was only short of an offensive divine ability now. It's said that divine ability relic only allows one person to comprehend it, but let me see if I can memorize it as well while Xiaodun's memorizing it. The moment Duan Ling Tian thought of this, he curiously extended his divine ability to approach the stone tablet that contained the divine ability. However, before his divine consciousness even managed to touch the stone tablet, it was blocked by a resistant force that came from the stone tablet. His divine consciousness was unable to get near it at all. To think it actually repelled my divine consciousness, looks like a divine ability relic does indeed only allow one person to memorize and comprehend it. Duan Lingtian shut his eyes to attain mental composure again and waited patiently when he realized Xiao Dun was not going to finish memorizing the divine ability anytime soon. Another 2 days and 2 nights had gone by. Xiao Dun finally finished memorizing the divine ability contained in the divine ability relic after 3 days and 3 nights. At the same time, Duan Lingtian and Xiao Dun realized their sights had gone dark, and when light appeared again, they were back at the lake. Senior brother Lingtian, let's go and get the other divine ability relic. Xiao Dun did not break his promise. After he had memorized the divine ability relic, he brought Duan Lingtian to the location of the second divine ability relic. Oh, senior brother Lingtian, before the divine ability relic appeared earlier, how did you know it's a defensive divine ability? Xiao Dun asked curiously as he looked at Duan Lingtian. It's because during the last trial, the rock golem cast a defensive divine ability. I've also discovered a divine ability relic previously. That's how I know the divine ability contained in the divine ability relic would usually appear at the final trial, Duan Lingtian answered. I see. Xiao Dun finally understood. At the same time, he asked casually, Senior brother Lingtian, what kind of divine ability did you obtain? Just like yours. A defensive divine ability, Duan Lingtian added again. A defensive divine ability as well. Xiao Dun was stunned for a moment before he smiled. It's a good thing you didn't choose that divine ability relic earlier. Otherwise, it'll be a waste. Not really, Duan Lingtian replied noncommittally to Xiao Dun's words, although both of them are defensive divine abilities, they're also separated into different grades. Not only that, but not all defensive divine abilities can be successfully comprehended. The defensive divine ability that you memorized might be more suitable for me than the one I memorized earlier. Perhaps, I might successfully comprehend the divine ability that you memorized but fail to comprehend the one that I memorized. You have a point, Xiao Dun nodded in agreement. Every divine ability had its own characteristic and could not be regarded as being in the same category. The second divine ability relic was located in a desert. The desert stretched out as far as the eyes could see. Due to the fine sand flying in the air and the wind, one's vision would be obstructed. The location of the other divine ability relic that Xiao Dun knew of was right here. Your friend is quite amazing. To think that he actually found a divine ability relic that's hidden here. Duan Lingtian sighed emotionally. When they reached the destination, Xiao Dun told Duan Lingtian, Senior brother Lingtian, continue to walk for less than 20 meters, and you'll encounter a formation to enter the location that houses the divine ability relic. I won't follow you there and be a hindrance to you. All right, Duan Lingtian nodded and did not say much as he made his way forward on his own. Just as he had expected, after walking for less than 20 meters, Duan Lingtian's sight turned dark, and he disappeared from Xiao Dun's sight. When Duan Lingtian appeared again, he was in a dark swamp. Now that senior brother Lingtian's gone, the path in front of me won't be that easy anymore. Xiao Dun could not help but feel slightly disappointed when he saw Duan Lingtian disappeared before his eyes. Regardless, he knew his partnership with Duan Lingtian was merely a temporary deal. Chapter 1776. Now that the deal has ended, I'll need to rely on myself to walk the path in front of me, Xiao Dun sighed inwardly. With his strength, every step would indeed be difficult for him in the St. Martial secret zone. Perhaps, he might be able to pass the trials of a low-grade divine ability relic, but it would be impossible for him to pass the trials of a medium or high-grade divine ability relic. Why am I thinking so much for? Currently, I've already obtained an uncommon medium-grade divine ability, and this is already a pleasant surprise. With my current strength, it would be too greedy of me to ask for more divine abilities. The moment Xiao Dun thought of this, he felt much more at ease and a smile appeared on his face. He had finally come to terms with this. Senior brother Lingtian, all the best to you. After Xiao Duan glanced in the direction where Duan Lingtian had disappeared, he turned around and became a lone ranger. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian who had entered the swamp began to welcome his first trial. The first trial was 4 wild beasts that appeared out of the swamp to block his way. When the 4 wild beasts joined forces, their strength was on par with the 5 flying-type fierce beasts at the entrance of the palace. However, these 4 beasts were from the same tribe, so they had a tacit understanding with one another. Even so, they were just 4 wild beasts at the peak of the pristine saint stage. They were no match for Duan Lingtian no matter how much they understood each other. For this reason, Duan Lingtian managed to kill all of them with just a raise of his hand. Why is there no movement? After killing the 4 wild beasts, Duan Lingtian stretched out his divine consciousness everywhere, but he did not sense any movements. In fact, whether it was the 6 Harmonies Tower or the palace before this, a great door would open up after he passed the first trial. Only when he had passed all the trials would he be able to obtain the divine ability relic that was hidden inside. However, at this moment, although he had already killed the 4 beasts that should be the first trial, he did not sense any movement in the surrounding. How should he go about the next trial and the ones after to obtain the divine ability relic inside this swamp area then? Duan Lingtian was still baffled and thinking about this matter when his divine consciousness suddenly gave a jolt. What's going on? From his divine consciousness, he could sense a slight movement from the surrounding of the swamp area. The originally calm swamp began to bubble and boil, gradually increasing its strength. In the end, it was like a raging wave. Whoosh, 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 When Duan Lingtian was staring at the swamp's surrounding solemnly, swift figures shot out of the swamp and covered the sky. They appeared in every direction around Duan Lingtian, surrounding him like locusts. The light from above was blocked off as well. These wild beasts, at this moment, Duan Lingtian discovered the figures surrounding him were wild beasts. These wild beasts were identical to the 4 wild beasts he had killed earlier. Intermediate, mastery, and even the peak of the pristine saint stage, there's even early refined saint stage wild beasts as well. After Duan Lingtian activated his divine eyes and stretched his divine consciousness out to envelop the surrounding wild beasts, he soon discovered the weakest among these wild beasts were at the intermediate pristine saint stage while the strongest ones were at the early refined saint stage. There was not 1 but 9 early refined saint stage wild beasts. 9 early refined saint stage wild beasts. Roar. Roar. Duan Lingtian glanced at the wild beasts that seemed as many as a swarm of locusts. He could see there were thousands of them. What kind of wild beast is this? To think that the clan is actually so huge. Duan Lingtian could tell the wild beasts before him all came from beneath the swamp. When he killed the 4 wild beasts earlier, he had enraged the wild beasts clan. Look at these wild beasts, don't tell me this is the first trial for the divine ability relic. Even Duan Lingtian had no idea why such a thought suddenly rose up in his mind. The moment this thought appeared, it stayed in his mind. After a while, Duan Lingtian's eyes lit up. If this clan of wild beasts was the first trial for the divine ability relic, did it mean the divine ability contained in the divine ability relic was more powerful than his 6 harmonies golden body and the one that Xiaodun's obtained? The moment he thought about this, he became excited. As for the group of wild beasts before him, although they were great in numbers and quite powerful, they were nothing in front of him. However, why are they only staring at me and not attacking? Duan Lingtian was a little baffled when he saw the thousands of identical wild beasts not making any move at all. He did know what this group of wild beasts was trying to do. At this moment, Duan Lingtian also took the time to study the group of wild beasts. To be honest, although he had killed 4 of the wild beasts earlier, he did not bother looking closely at them at all. Now that he had the time, he carefully examined the characteristics of these wild beasts. The type of wild beasts before him were humanoid wild beasts. Their bodies were swollen and they had a pair of flesh wings behind their backs. They had thick skin that was covered with wrinkles on their bodies. Coupled with their enormous head, they looked extremely disgusting. Among the group of wild beasts, the 9 early refined saint stage wild beasts were the biggest in size. Each of them was about 5 meters tall. Those slightly weaker were about 4 meters tall. The weakest ones were the shortest and smallest. All of a sudden, Duan Lingtian's divine consciousness gave a jolt. He could sense a powerful aura had appeared at the swamp area behind him. The aura was so powerful that it was even greater than the 9 early refined saint stage wild beasts. Colossal Sword Bell. When Duan Lingtian sensed the aura seemed to have dangerously locked on him, he immediately activated the Sun True Origin in his body. In just a blink of an eye, streaks of golden dazzling sword rays formed a defensive layer around his body. It looked like a gigantic bell. Bang! At the moment the colossal sword bell was formed, a loud sound resonated and the colossal sword bell shook violently. As it turned out, a gigantic figure had tried to sneak an attack on Duan Lingtian. Although it could be considered successful in its sneak attack, it was unfortunate it could not break the defense of the colossal sword bell at all. Meanwhile, Duan Lingtian turned to look at the thing that tried to sneak an attack on him. It was a wild beast that was almost 10 meters tall. The appearance of this wild beast was identical to the thousands of wild beasts in his surrounding. However, there was a golden dazzling crown on the head of this wild beast that was the size of a small hill, revealing his extraordinary identity. Roar, ow, growl, At the same time, the thousands of wild beasts that were originally quiet in his surrounding looked at the crowned wild beast one after another and howled. Their high-pitched voice seemed to be filled with respect. It seems like this must be the king of the wild beasts. Duan Lingtian would have lived his entire life in vain if he still could not figure this out. The Mastery Refined Saint stage. This wild beast king is actually at the Mastery Refined Saint stage. If this group of wild beasts is really the first trial to obtain the divine ability relic, then the divine ability contained in it must be extremely high grade. Naturally, a high-grade divine ability means the trials are going to be extremely difficult. Initially, Duan Lingtian was consumed with excitement. However, when he thought more about it, it was as though a cold bucket of water had been poured on him as he snapped back to reality. Since the first trial to enter was already this difficult, would the coming trials be any easier? Of course not. I'll stop thinking about the other things for now. The most important thing now is to solve this problem first. Soon after, Duan Lingtian shifted his attention back to the group of wild beasts in front of him. It was apparent from how the group of wild beasts had gathered to surround him while their king made a sneak attack that they did not come with good intentions. Roar! As the wild beast king roared furiously, the thousands of wild beasts that were originally watching by the side charged at Duan Lingtian menacingly with a murderous gleam in their eyes. When the thousands of wild beasts charged at Duan Lingtian, his heart tightened even though he had been through and seen a lot. Naturally, this did not mean Duan Lingtian was afraid of them, it was just an instinctive reaction. Trying to win through numbers. Faced with the clan of menacing wild beasts, Duan Lingtian sneered. In the next instant, the air within a 100-meter radius of him began to tremble before a gigantic golden ball enveloped the area. However, the group of wild beasts did not seem to fear anything as they charged into the 10,000 swords territory that Duan Lingtian had activated immediately. Whoosh, 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 Inside Duan Lingtian's 10,000 swords territory, 10,000 sword rays whizzed around. Those weaker wild beasts that charged in were killed immediately while the strong ones were killed after withstanding 2 to 3 moves. Those that were even more powerful, on the other hand, were able to endure for a while, but in the end, they still could not escape death. Soon after, the 9 early refined saint stage wild beasts charged in as well. I've been waiting for you for a long time. From when Duan Lingtian had activated his 10,000 swords territory until now, he was merely watching by the side and only used his mind to control the territory. Now that he saw the 9 early refined saint stage wild beasts were charging in, he lifted his right hand slightly. In the next instant, without any movement, his entire being vanished into thin air. In just a blink of an eye, he appeared again on the same spot. As for the 9 early refined saint stage wild beasts, they fell from the sky one by one and lost their lives. Roar! When the 9 early refined saint stage wild beasts died, the wild beast king outside the territory seemed to be able to feel it as it let out an ear-deafening roar before charging into Duan Lingtian's territory as well. The remaining wild beasts charged into Duan Lingtian's territory as though they were given a boost when they saw how furious their king was. Unfortunately, only death awaited them. What? You're going to avenge them? Faced with the king of the wild beasts that was charging at him with bloodshot eyes, Duan Lingtian sneered and charged at it as well. The sword ray in his hand shone in all directions like a dazzling sun. Chapter 1777. The Mastery Refined Saint Stage Wild Beast King did not have a defensive divine ability like the gigantic statue and the rock golem. For this reason, he was killed by Duan Lingtian's attack that was equivalent to the full might of a martial cultivator at the peak of the Refined Saint stage. When the Wild Beast King died, the other wild beasts did not panic. Instead, they went berserk. Moreover, the surrounding swamp began to bubble and boil as well. One by one, wild beasts shot out from the swamp. Although the numbers were not as many as before, there were at least several hundreds of them. The strongest among the several hundreds of wild beasts that had just joined the remaining wild beast army were only at the early refined saint stage. For this reason, no matter if the numbers of wild beasts increased their strength, it did not pressure Duan Lingtian at all. They charged into Duan Lingtian's 10,000 swords territory one after another like flying moths that were attracted to fire regardless of danger. It was as though they were only living for this moment of glory. As time passed by, Duan Lingtian became slightly bored. In the end, although he knew these wild beasts were mirror images that were formed from the illusory formation, and they would evaporate when they die, Duan Lingtian was still stunned by how fearless they were of death. In the end, he no longer made any move and let the 10,000 swords territory kill the wild beasts that entered it. Only until the last wild beast had died that Duan Lingtian finally breathed a sigh of relief. Before he even finished sighing in relief, a voice resonated from all directions and entered his ears clearly. "Little guy, congratulations for passing the first trial of the Abyssal Swamp. There are 8 more trials awaiting you, and I'll be waiting for you at the last one." This voice seemed as though it belonged to an old man. Duan Lingtian was momentarily stunned before he became excited. "When I was going through the 6 Harmonies Tower or the 6 Halls Palace, I didn't get a reminder at all. Moreover, the attack from the group of wild beasts earlier is only the first trial to obtain this divine ability relic. This place where this divine ability relic is hidden is called the Abyssal Swamp." After taking a deep breath, Duan Lingtian finally calmed down. In fact, although he had his suspicion, he was not entirely certain if the attack from the group of wild beasts was the first trial. If it was the first trial, then it would mean the divine ability contained in this divine ability relic would be extraordinary, or at the very least, it would be definitely more powerful than the 6 Harmonies golden body that he obtained in the rock heaven wall that Xiaodun obtained. However, after he heard the reminder from that ancient voice that seemed to resonate from all directions, Duan Lingtian was finally able to confirm his suspicion. This divine ability relic must contain a high-grade divine ability. Originally, Duan Lingtian thought the 6 Harmonies golden body that he obtained could be considered as pretty good. However, he finally realized, now that he had this to compare to, that it must only be a medium-grade divine ability. It was always the scariest to make a comparison, since inferiority and superiority would be instantly revealed. The voice earlier seemed to say, "I have 8 more trials ahead of me. Where's the second trial going to take place then?" Duan Lingtian felt puzzled as the divine consciousness he stretched out sensed some movement in the sky at the side. When he shifted his gaze over, he saw that a crack had appeared out of thin air. Subsequently, a heavy and big door appeared slowly before Duan Lingtian. The door revealed a path that led to an unknown place. "The door opens after I pass the first trial. Just as I expected, this is just the same as the previous 3 divine ability relics that I encountered before this. However, the first trial of this divine ability relic is much more difficult than the others," Duan Lingtian thought to himself. As for the reason why Xiaodun said the level of difficulty for the first trial is similar to the first trial in the 6 Halls Palace, well, it's probably a misunderstanding. Perhaps, it did not occur to him that the 4 wild beasts were merely the prelude to the first trial. The first trial would only appear after the 4 beasts are killed. Naturally, Duan Lingtian knew why Xiaodun would misunderstand, since he and his partner could not defeat the 4 wild beasts. Although the 4 wild beasts were fewer than the fierce beasts that showed up in the 6 Halls Palace's first trial, due to the reason they were from the same clan, they had a great understanding of each other. Due to this, the strength of their joint attacks was in no way inferior to the joint attacks of the 5 flying-type fierce beasts at the entrance of the 6 Halls Palace. The latter appeared to attack at the same time, but in truth, they were in a chaotic state. "Let's go in." Duan Lingtian's heart leapt as he charged through the heavy and big door. What awaited him inside? Duan Lingtian was curious. However, he also knew the trials ahead would not be easier than the first trial. As he walked through the big door, darkness enveloped him. It was only until Duan Lingtian activated the sun true origin on his body that made his entire body shine like the sun that this dark space revealed what it was. It was a dark tunnel heading downward. Duan Lingtian was currently standing above the tunnel. At first, the tunnel's path was straight with a corner several hundreds of meters away. The terrain of this tunnel is getting lower and lower. Don't tell me it's bringing me somewhere. Maybe the end of the tunnel is where the trial is located. The moment he thought of this, he picked up his speed. What would the second trial be? He had no idea. Although the unknown was scary, the moment he thought of how the divine ability contained in this divine ability relic would most likely be a high-grade one, he became excited again. "I guess I'm about 100 meters underground now, right?" As time went by, Duan Lingtian only felt the tunnel seemed to be endless. It was fine initially, however, he began to feel a little impatient after a while. "I must be at least 300 meters underground now, but I still haven't reached the end yet. How long is this tunnel?" Although Duan Lingtian was impatient, he did not give up, and he kept going further in. A day soon passed by in just a blink of an eye. I must be more than 1,000 meters underground now. 2 days had gone by. It's 2,000 meters now. 3 days went by. I'm already 3,000 meters in. Is this going to continue? 3 days later, Duan Lingtian was still walking in the tunnel. He came to a halt for the first time and no longer moved forward. He stood there as he said through clenched teeth, "I really can't believe this." The moment he finished speaking, he began to move as fast as a specter. Another day went by, and he was 10,000 meters in. However, he still did not reach the end of the tunnel. It was as though this tunnel did not have an end. I see. Duan Lingtian came to a halt and no longer seemed as impatient as before. Instead, he smiled knowingly. So this is actually the second trial. What a brilliant illusory formation. If I didn't activate my strange pupil half a day ago, it would have been really difficult for me to notice that I've been walking on the same path. 10,000 meters my foot. Currently, I'm only about 1,000 meters underground. The reason I felt I had already made it to about 10,000 meters underground is all thanks to the illusory formation in this tunnel. Since the tunnel looked practically the same, Duan Lingtian did not realize that he had been walking on the same path over and over again. However, when he activated his strange pupil and studied the details inside the tunnel clearly, he finally noticed that he had been walking on the same path. The reason was the illusory formation. This illusory formation must be the second trial. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath as he immersed his entire being into the illusory formation. If he wanted to break this illusory formation, he must find the foundations, and more importantly, the core of the illusory formation. For this reason, when Duan Lingtian continued to walk down the tunnel, he extended his divine consciousness completely to explore the surrounding as he searched every nook and cranny. At the same time, he also leaned his entire body on one side of the stone wall and released all his Sun True Origin into the tunnel's stone wall. As long as he sensed something hidden inside it, his Sun True Origin would immediately shatter and destroy it. Naturally, he was also still using his strange pupil as it continued to deplete his spiritual energy. After it was completely depleted, he stopped to recuperate. After he recuperated, he continued again. Just like this, 6 and 7 days went by. As the saying went, good things come to those who wait. On the 7th day, Duan Lingtian finally found the first foundation of the illusory formation hidden inside the tunnel. He instantly activated his Sun True Origin to destroy it. If it was the core of the formation would be gone if it was destroyed. However, if it was just one of the foundations of the formation, unless it was an important foundation, it would not be able to break the formation. This was Duan Lingtian's current situation. However, now that he had found his first formation's foundation, he was filled with enthusiasm. Half a day later, he managed to find the second foundation of the formation and destroyed it. This formation base was obviously much more important than the previous one. The moment it was destroyed, a ray of light suddenly appeared at the end of the dark tunnel. Although it was far away, Duan Lingtian was still able to see it. That's the exit. At this moment, Duan Lingtian also noticed the illusory formation had been destroyed by him. This trial is really time-consuming. Although there were no fighting or killing in the second trial, it had taken 10 days of Duan Lingtian's time. If he could pick, he would rather pick a trial similar to the first one. The second trial was too mentally exhausting. Duan Lingtian walked out of the tunnel by following the ray of light. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. At the moment when Duan Lingtian walked out of the tunnel, his heart jolted as he sensed a hostile aura. He immediately activated the Sun True Origin in his body that transformed into thousands of sword rays before it formed the defensive colossal sword bell around him. Boom, 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 comma. As soon as the colossal sword bell was formed, Duan Lingtian suddenly felt a tremble. Subsequently, waves of mysterious forces began to rain down on him menacingly. Chapter 1778, Chapter 1779, Winged Fiery Beast. Endless Fantasy Translation. It had already been 1.5 months since they entered the St. Martial Secret Zone. More and more mystical Sky Mansion's disciples were being kicked out from the St. Martial Secret Zone, but some of these eliminated mystical Sky Mansion's disciples did not leave in a hurry. Instead, they also waited outside the entrance. They wanted to ask about the others and what they had gained. Apart from that, they also wanted to see how many people would be able to survive a full 3 months in the St. Martial Secret Zone. Once 3 months were up, everyone who was still inside would be automatically sent out by the St. Martial Secret Zone. Otherwise, they would not be sent out unless they died in there. The divine ability relic I found was just too ridiculous. There were 2 of us at the peak of the pristine saint stage and 1 at the early refined saint stage, but we still couldn't pass the 6th trial. The guardian beast of that level was at the intermediate refined saint stage. After we realized we couldn't defeat it, we tried to flee. In the end, the other 2 managed to escape, but I was a little slow and was killed by the fierce beast with 1 slap. One of the mystical Sky Mansion's disciples let loose a torrent of words. A bitter smile and an unwilling expression appeared on his face when he reached the end of his sentence. Looks like the difficulty inside the location of the divine ability relic you came across is pretty much the same with the one that I found. However, our little team is a little stronger than yours. Apart from me who's at the peak of the pristine saint stage, the other 2 are at the early refined saint stage. We passed the 6th trial with our joint efforts, but we failed the 7th trial. The other mystical Sky Mansion's disciple smiled wryly. If I'm not mistaken, that must have been the last trial. The trial was a puppet at the mastery refined saint stage. Although it's not as powerful as a martial or Tao cultivator at the mastery refined saint stage, it's not something 2 early refined saint stage martial cultivators could handle. Mastery refined saint stage puppet. All of you were killed? The former asked the latter in shocked. No, they managed to escape, but I was killed. The latter had a bitter smile on his face. Looks like we share the same unfortunate fate then. The former smiled wryly as he sighed. Then, as though he was reminded of something, he looked at Qian Ping Sheng, the palace master of Yellow Palace, who was nearby. Lord Palace Master, since the trials to obtain the divine ability relics we encountered were so difficult, the divine ability contained inside must be a high-grade divine ability, right? This mystical Sky Mansion's disciple was from the Yellow Palace. High-grade divine ability. Upon hearing his words, Qian Ping Sheng shook his head. Based on your descriptions earlier, the divine ability relics both of you encountered must be a medium-grade divine ability relic. If it's a high-grade divine ability relic, the first trial is not something both of you will be able to pass. What? Upon hearing that, the Yellow Palace's disciple gasped. The trials to obtain the divine ability relic was so difficult, but it only contains a medium-grade divine ability. Can anybody even get their hands on a high-grade divine ability at all? At the same time, the mystical Sky Mansion's disciples who were all kicked out shifted their attention to Qian Ping Sheng too. In the history of our mystical Sky Mansion, there are not many people who manage to obtain the high-grade divine abilities inside the Saint Martial Secret Zone. It's said that if you don't have a cultivation base at the Mastery Refined Saint stage and above, it'll be impossible for you to challenge the high-grade divine ability relics trials on your own. It's not even certain you can face the trials of a high-grade divine ability relic even if you're at the peak of the Refined Saint stage, Qian Ping Sheng added. Naturally, that's only if you go through the trials alone. If many people join forces, the cultivation base requirement could be lowered a little, but it can't be below the intermediate Refined Saint stage. In the history of our mystical Sky Mansion, the lowest cultivation base group that obtained a high-grade divine ability was a team of martial cultivators who were at the intermediate Refined Saint stage. They succeeded because the high-grade divine ability relic they encountered was slightly inferior in regards to grade. In the Saint Martial Secret Zone, even high-grade divine ability relics are separated into various grades and levels as well. In the history of our mystical Sky Mansion, some of the high-grade divine ability relics are completely untouchable. Qian Ping Sheng continued saying, naturally, those high-grade divine ability relics are much superior in grade and contained a more powerful high-grade divine ability. The high-grade divine ability relics were separated into various grades and levels. The mystical Sky Mansion's disciples present on the scene felt that they had learned a lot. Buzz, 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 comma. At this moment, the whirlpool at the entrance of the Saint Martial Secret Zone suddenly whirled, attracting the attention of almost everyone on the scene. Somebody came out again, many mystical Sky Mansion's disciples exclaimed. At the same time, a figure also appeared from the entrance of the Saint Martial Secret Zone. Xiao Dun. The moment this person came out, an Earth Palace's disciple went up to him immediately. How did you get sent out? At the same time, the 3 mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan standing behind Zhao Deng had a murderous gleam in their eyes. They recognized Xiao Dun as that person whom they had surrounded and attacked inside the Saint Martial Secret Zone. It was exactly because of Ling Tian's intervention that he was able to remain in the Saint Martial Secret Zone, and they were kicked out instead. Now that they saw Xiao Dun, they were reminded about their sad past that took place 2 weeks ago. The Earth Palace's disciple who went up to Xiaodun asked, "Weren't you saved by senior brother Ling Tian?" This Earth Palace's disciple was the one who was originally working together with Xiaodun and was kicked out by the 3 mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan. The clues that led to the 2 divine ability relics that Xiaodun knew about were both discovered by him. Yeah, Xiaodun nodded. I was rescued by senior brother Ling Tian, but that was 10 days ago. After I brought him to the location of the divine ability relic, I went separate ways with him. However, prior to that, I managed to obtain one of the divine ability relics and memorized a divine ability. When he reached the end of his sentence, he smiled brightly. Upon hearing that, the Earth Palace's disciple smiled as well. That's great. However, when Xiaodun looked at the Earth Palace's disciple again, his smile faded. Brother Zheng, I've given one of the divine ability relics you discovered to senior brother Ling Tian. You won't blame me, right? Qin Zheng, the Earth Palace's disciple, shook his head and said, of course not. I've already been kicked out. Naturally, those 2 divine ability relics were up to you to deal with. Since senior brother Ling Tian has helped you to obtain one of the divine abilities, it's just right for you to give the other one to him. It had been 2 weeks since he was eliminated, so he had already calmed down and come to terms with whatever was supposed to happen would happen. That was how it was. That was why when he learned that Xiaodun had obtained one of the divine abilities contained in the 2 divine ability relics, he was happy for Xiaodun from the bottom of his heart. Ling Tian, the people present on the scene heard Xiaodun's words. Qian Ping Sheng, the palace master of Yellow Palace, even looked at him and asked, what kind of divine ability did Ling Tian help you to obtain? The moment such words came out of Qian Ping Sheng's mouth, most of the people shifted their attention to Xiaodun. This included Zhu Luqi, the palace master of Heaven Palace. Xiaodun could ignore other people's eyes, but he did not dare to ignore Zhu Luqi since he was the palace master of the palace he belonged to. If he wanted to have a good life in the mystical Sky Mansion, it would depend on whether the palace master of Heaven Palace thought highly of him or not. Under the watchful eyes of the others, Xiaodun replied, the divine ability I obtained is called the Rock Heaven Wall. Rock Heaven Wall. The moment these words left his mouth, the group vice mansion masters of mystical Sky Mansion were shocked. Even Meng Qing, the mansion master of mystical Sky Mansion, who was sitting cross-legged far away, had opened his eyes immediately and looked at Xiaodun. Xiaodun's heart leapt when he noticed Meng Qing's gaze on him. He could feel the pressure turned heavier. Among medium-grade divine abilities, the Rock Heaven Wall is one that's top-rated. It's your luck you're able to obtain the Rock Heaven Wall. And I hope that you'll be able to break through to the Divine Saint stage and successfully comprehend and master this divine ability in the future, Qian Ping Sheng told Xiaodun. In the history of our mystical Sky Mansion, although there were many people who had obtained this divine ability, very few of them managed to break through to the Divine Saint stage, so we've never seen anyone mastering this divine ability before, let alone passing it down. It's a top-rated divine ability among medium-grade divine abilities. Upon hearing his words, Xiaodun's eyes lit up immediately. It did not cross his mind that the defensive divine ability, the Rock Heaven Wall, that he obtained was actually not an ordinary medium-grade divine ability. Congratulations, Xiaodun. At the same time, a few Heaven Palace's disciples who were kicked out congratulated him one by one. There were jealousy, envy, and hatred in the depth of their eyes. Whichever mystical Sky Mansion's disciple who managed to obtain a medium grade or above divine ability relic in the St. Martial's secret zone and memorize the divine ability it contained would be heavily nurtured by the mystical Sky Mansion in the future. For this reason, every mystical Sky Mansion's disciple who entered the St. Martial's secret zone would be bursting with energy to obtain a divine ability relic. Although there were some people who had memorized divine ability before Xiaodun, the divine abilities they memorized were all low-grade divine abilities. Congratulations, Xiaodun. At this moment, Zhu Luqi, the palace master of Heaven Palace, also smiled as he looked at Xiaodun. This Heaven Palace's disciple whom he did not pay much attention to appeared quite promising now. Thank you, Lord Palace Master. Xiaodun was overwhelmed by the compliments and glory. When the disciples from the other 3 palaces looked at him, jealousy, envy, and hatred could be seen in their eyes. The expressions of Zhao Dang, his son, and the other 3 mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan had turned slightly grave as well. In their opinion, that should be the Zhao clan's divine ability. Ling Tian. At this moment, whether it was Zhao Dang or Zhao Ji, the hatred they had toward Duan Ling Tian in their hearts had deepened even more. Rock Heaven Wall, if I'm not mistaken, you and Ling Tian must have entered the Six Halls Palace. Zhu Luqi looked at Xiao Dun, and after he finished saying this, he asked again, you said you gave the other divine ability relic to Ling Tian. What are the characteristics of the location that houses the divine ability relic? It was apparent Zhu Luqi also wanted to find out what kind of divine ability Duan Ling Tian would obtain. After we've entered the location of the divine ability relic, the first thing that appeared was a swamp area. There were 4 ugly and disgusting wild beasts that appeared during the first trial. Xiao Dun even described the appearance of the wild beasts on purpose. When Xiao Dun described the appearance of the 4 wild beasts, Zhu Luqi narrowed his eyes while Qian Pingsheng even exclaimed out loud, "Winged fiery beast! Winged fiery beast!" Meng Qing, the mansion master of the mystical sky mansion, who was originally sitting cross-legged nearby, immediately stood up when he heard Xiao Dun's description. Chapter 1779. Chapter 1780. The Number 1 Divine Ability. Endless Fantasy Translation. Zhu Luqi, the palace master of Heaven Palace, stared at Xiao Dun with a burning gaze as he further asked for confirmation, "Are you sure the location of the divine ability relic is a swamp area? Not only that, but are you certain you didn't exaggerate the appearance of the 4 wild beasts?" At this moment, Xiao Dun also noticed the atmosphere was not quite right. Although that was the case, he still nodded in confirmation to Zhu Luqi's questions. "I'm certain what I said is correct. On top of that, I entered that place together with Brother Zheng so he can prove what I said is true." After saying that, Xiao Dun looked at Qin Zheng, that Earth Palace's disciple. In fact, the 2 divine ability relics he knew were both discovered by Qin Zheng, so he had gone to the location of the 2 divine ability relics with Xiao Dun before. It was only until they were stuck at the first trial that they decided to flee and look for another person to join them. Who knew they would encounter the 3 mystical Sky Mansion's disciples from the Zhao clan who tried to take advantage of them. In order to kill the chicken to scare the monkey, the 3 of them had even killed Qin Zheng's clone. The moment Xiao Dun's words left his mouth, the group of mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials, including Meng Qing, the mansion master of mystical Sky Mansion, shifted their attention to Qin Zheng in unison, giving him a sense of pressure. Qin Zheng did not dare to dally and quickly nodded his head in confirmation. Xiao Dun's right. It's really that place. After they received confirmation, the group of mystical Sky Mansion's high-ranking officials, including Meng Qing, shook their heads. Zhao Dang, who was one of the vice mansion masters of mystical Sky Mansion, had a gloating look in his eyes as though he was taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. Xiao Dun noticed the strange atmosphere at once and could not help but ask Zhu Luqi, "Lord Palace Master, is there something wrong?" "There's nothing wrong." Zhu Luqi shook his head. "In the history of our mystical Sky Mansion, many people have found the location of that divine ability relic you mentioned, but nobody has ever passed the first trial of that divine ability relic. Not only that, but very few people were able to escape from the trials of that divine ability relic too." What? Upon hearing his words, many mystical Sky Mansion's disciples were shocked. Xiao Dun and Qin Zheng were dumbfounded. They looked at each other and could see the disbelief in each other's eyes. They had tried to pass the first trial of that divine ability, and it did not seem as difficult as they had described. "Lord Palace Master, Brother Zheng and I have entered the location of that divine ability relic before. The first trial only had 4 wild beasts at the peak of the pristine saint stage. The difficulty is equivalent to the first trial of the 6-Hall Palace. It's not so difficult until the point where nobody in the history of our mystical Sky Mansion has ever succeeded in passing it, right?" Xiao Dun could not help but ask. Qin Zheng nodded his head as well. Since he was there, he agreed with Xiao Dun's words. "The 4 wild beasts that you encountered are not the first trial of that divine ability relic. The first trial of the divine ability relic will only begin for real after the 4 wild beasts are killed." Zhu Luqi shook his head and explained, "After killing that 4 beasts, thousands of wild beasts identical to the 4 wild beasts will appear in the surroundings of the swamp. That's a huge clan of wild beasts. There are more than 10 of them that are at the refined saint stage and above. Their king's strength, in particular, is at the mastery refined saint stage. It has almost reached the peak of the refined saint stage. Just by cultivation base alone, they might not seem strong since none of them is at the peak of the refined saint stage, but just the sheer number alone is awfully terrifying. Among the thousands of wild beasts, the weakest ones are at the pristine saint stage. When they appear, they'll cover the entire sky. Nobody will be able to withstand it unless it's the territory of an eminent saint stage powerhouse or higher. In the history of our mystical sky mansion, there was a little team of one Tao cultivator at the peak of the refined saint stage, one mastery refined saint stage martial cultivator, and 3 intermediate refined saint stage martial cultivators who tried to enter the location of that divine ability. However, in the end, the entire team was wiped out just like that. When the thousands of wild beasts charged at them, they only managed to kill a few hundred of them before they were killed. Zhu Luqi finished saying this in one breath. Gasp, 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 comma. The moment Zhu Luqi's words left his mouth, the group of mystical sky mansion's disciples present on the scene gasped one after another. My dear Lord, what kind of divine ability relic is that? Just the first trial alone is ridiculously difficult. How horrifying. Although Ling Tian is powerful, he's only at the peak of the refined saint stage. He'll most likely die if he enters that place. With Ling Tian's strength, perhaps, he might have a chance at obtaining ordinary high-grade divine ability relics. However, it's apparent this high-grade divine ability relic is not something that he can deal with. Just how terrifying is the divine ability contained in this high-grade divine ability relic? It's already shocking enough just thinking about it. It's certain that the divine ability contained in that divine ability relic must be extraordinary. Be that as it may, nobody would be able to obtain it no matter how extraordinary it is. That's right, it's just too difficult, comma. After the group of mystical sky mansion's disciples returned to their senses, they discussed among themselves. None of them thought Duan Ling Tian would be able to pass the first trial of that divine ability relic. A rare smile appeared on Zhao Ji's face. It was a gloating smile that spoke of his delight at Duan Ling Tian's misfortune. That 4 wild beasts are the prelude to the first trial of that divine ability relic. Upon hearing Zhu Luqi's words, Xiao Dun could not help but gasp before exchanging glances with Qin Zheng. Both of them saw the shocked and baffled looks in each other's eyes. Not even in their wildest dreams would they think the divine ability relic they thought was a medium-grade relic would actually turn out to be such a horrifying high-grade divine ability relic. Then, does this mean senior brother Ling Tian is in danger? The moment Xiao Dun thought of Duan Ling Tian, regret filled his heart. If he had known how dangerous that divine ability relic was, he would not have brought him there. After all, Duan Ling Tian was his life savior, and he was not the type who was ungrateful and would leave his benefactor in the lurch. Zhu Luqi looked at Xiao Dun and asked solemnly, when did Ling Tian enter the location of the divine ability relic? At this moment, he could not help but worry about Duan Ling Tian's safety. After all, in the mystical sky mansion's history, the location of the divine ability relic was the #1 forbidden place in the Saint Martial secret zone. Its name was enough to make people tremble. Ling Tian, who was the most outstanding disciple among the younger generation in their heaven palace and the entire mystical sky mansion, on the other hand, had actually unknowingly entered that place. How could he not be worried? In fact, the benefits Ling Tian reaped in the Saint Martial secret zone were very important to the mystical sky mansion. With his innate talent, he would definitely be able to break through to the divine saint stage if he did not die suddenly. On top of that, the possibility of him comprehending and mastering the divine ability he obtained from the Saint Martial secret zone was also greater than other people. It was precisely because of this, he did not hope for Duan Ling Tian to be kicked out so fast. About 10 days ago, Xiao Dun answered after a moment of silence. 10 days ago. Upon hearing Xiao Dun's words, Ji Yuli, who had been standing quietly by the side, could not help but sigh in relief. He has entered the location of that divine ability relic 10 days ago, but up until now, he hasn't come out yet. I think senior brother Ling Tian must have turned the misfortune into a fortune. Ji Yuli's assumption was what most people thought as well. It seems like Ling Tian has gotten himself out of trouble. That's right, he has not been kicked out after 10 days, he must have fled and left that divine ability relic alone. Although the divine ability inside the divine ability relic is good, it's still impossible for Ling Tian to obtain it with his strength. Many mystical sky mansion's disciples discussed among themselves. They felt Duan Ling Tian must have survived the attack from the group of wild beasts and left that divine ability relic behind. Previously, Xiao Dun's mind was in chaos from being too worried. Now that he had calmed down, he sighed in relief as well. It has already been 10 days since then, and senior brother Ling Tian hasn't come out yet. He must have left the location of that divine ability relic. I hope he doesn't think that I wanted to harm him. Xiao Dun smiled wryly when he reached the end of his thoughts. It has already been 10 days, and he has not been kicked out. Zhao Deng's expression was grim. It was obvious Ling Tian had fled the location of that divine ability relic alive since he had not been eliminated even though he had entered that place 10 days ago. At this moment, the gloating smile on Zhao Ji's face froze as well. From the beginning until the end, nobody, including Meng Qing, the mansion master of Mystical Sky Mansion, felt that Duan Ling Tian would be able to pass the first trial of that divine ability relic, let alone obtaining the divine ability inside it. In the history of the Mystical Sky Mansion, the location of the divine ability relic that Duan Ling Tian entered was the #1 forbidden place in the Saint Martial's secret zone. Not only that, but divine ability it contained was also widely acknowledged by former seniors in the Mystical Sky Mansion to be the #1 divine ability among the various divine abilities in the Mystical Sky Mansion's Saint Martial secret zone. Ling Tian's really lucky. To think that he actually entered the location of the #1 divine ability relic in the Mystical Sky Mansion's Saint Martial secret zone. However, if his cultivation base is only at the peak of the refined saint stage, it'll be impossible for him to pass the first trial of that divine ability relic, let alone obtaining that #1 divine ability. Although Qi was from the Azure Cloud Mansion, he had heard about the #1 divine ability inside the Mystical Sky Mansion's Saint Martial secret zone. There was no divine ability relics in their Azure Cloud Mansion's Saint Martial secret zone that could compete with that divine ability relic in the Mystical Sky Mansion's Saint Martial secret zone at all. Naturally, whether it was the Azure Cloud Mansion or the Mountainshade Black Market, none of them coveted that extraordinary divine ability relic in the Mystical Sky Mansion's Saint Martial secret zone. This was because they knew it was impossible for anybody in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land to obtain the divine ability inside that divine ability relic. Naturally, Duan Ling Tian was unaware of what was happening outside. He did not even know that the location of the divine ability relic he had entered was widely known as the #1 forbidden area that housed the #1 divine ability in the Saint Martial secret zone in the history of Mystical Sky Mansion. This divine ability was also the nightmare of the younger generation in the Mystical Sky Mansion's history. Nobody had ever passed the first trial of this divine ability relic, let alone obtaining the divine ability. Duan Ling Tian did not know what was happening outside, and the people outside had no idea what was happening inside. They did not even know that Duan Ling Tian had already passed through the first and second trials of that horrifying divine ability relic and had successfully walked out of the tunnel of the second trial where the third trial would take place. Boom, 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 Duan Ling Tian activated his colossal sword bell and managed to withstand the terrifying force that rained down like a waterfall before successfully making his way to the flat land ahead of him. Chapter 1780. After Duan Ling Tian arrived at the flat land, he turned around to look at the force that rained down ceaselessly like a waterfall. He discovered the force was milky white, and it emitted a terrifying aura that could send chills up one's spine. I only encountered this force after I walked out of the tunnel. It's a good thing the Sun true origin in my body is equivalent to an early eminent saint stage powerhouse. Otherwise, it's very likely I won't be able to withstand the impact even with if the defensive technique I used is formed from the true origin at the peak of the refined saint stage. Duan Ling Tian counted himself lucky. Someone at the peak of the refined saint stage would most likely die, if not heavily injured, if he exited from that tunnel. Duan Ling Tian was very clear about this since he had just experienced this. I wonder what's the third trial, Duan Ling Tian muttered to himself. He turned around, and his eyes landed on the milky white force as a thought appeared in his mind. Don't tell me the force that rained down without any respite earlier is the third trial of the abyssal swamp. Initially, due to the lingering fear in his heart, he did not connect the force to the third trial. However, now that he had calmed down a little, he could not help but feel that was the case. Nonetheless, after a few moments, he began to doubt himself. Isn't the third trial too easy? Duan Ling Tian's heart wavered again. He was not sure whether it was the third trial or not. Does it matter if it's the third trial or not? I still need to go forward anyway to face the other trials. Only after going through 8 trial will I be able to meet the owner of that voice. The final trial must have something to do with him since he told me he'll be waiting for me at the final trial. When Duan Ling Tian thought of the words said by the mysterious voice earlier, he began to feel excited. If he managed to pass the 9 trials of the abyssal swamp, including the final trial that had something to do with the voice, it also meant he would be able to obtain the divine ability relic from this place. Based on the difficulty level of the abyssal swamp's trials, the divine ability contained in the divine ability relic had to be extraordinary. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath to calm down his excitement before he turned his back to the force that fell like a waterfall. Duan Lingtian finally had the heart and time to study the world outside the tunnel. He was currently standing on the bridgehead of an arch bridge. White mist laced with red shrouded the other end of the arch bridge and blocked Duan Lingtian's sight. He could not see past it at all. The arch bridge was very wide and long. It was located above a river that had completely dried up. I'll have a look there. Since Duan Lingtian had already reached here, naturally, he would not turn around and walk back. Filled with determination, he walked to the other end of the arch bridge. As soon as he stepped on the bridge, he immediately felt a mysterious pressure pressing down on him. Could this be the fourth trial? Duan Lingtian thought to himself as his heart jolted. At the moment this thought appeared in his mind, the bridge beneath his feet began to quake violently as though it was capable of toppling mountains. His first instinct was to rise up in the air to avoid this earthquake. Soon after, he discovered the pressure that was pressing down on him earlier was an extremely high-grade flight-prohibiting formation. He could not fly and leave the arch bridge beneath his feet at all. Crack, 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 crack. As the sounds of cracks forming sounded, Duan Lingtian saw the cracks that had begun to appear on the arch bridge. Judging by the current situation, it would not take long for the arch bridge to collapse. However, when Duan Lingtian looked at the dried-up river, he did not rush as he continued to walk forward since he felt there would not be a difference even if the bridge collapsed. Boom! Another earth-shattering sound resonated. As it turned out, the arch bridge had already begun to collapse at a very rapid speed. It's collapsing so fast. Duan Lingtian was shocked when he saw this. The speed of the bridge collapsing had gone beyond his imagination. Even if he tried to escape now, it would be difficult for him to escape before the arch bridge collapsed. As the arch bridge collapsed, the sun true origin in Duan Lingtian's body glowed and formed the colossal sword bell as stones and rubble flew everywhere. Many of the stones and rubble hit Duan Lingtian as well, but they were all blocked by the colossal sword bell. This bridge collapsed in a very strange way. At the same time, Duan Lingtian's expression turned grave as well since he knew everything was just an illusion. There must be a reason for the arch bridge to collapse just like that. Boom, 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 comma. Just as Duan Lingtian almost reached the dried-up river, a loud sound resonated behind him. It sounded like a flood was raging. No, the loud sound resonated from behind was even more horrifying than the thought of a raging flood. Duan Lingtian instinctively turned around to look. With just a glance, he saw the milky white force was sweeping out in his direction. As it turned out, the waterfall-like force had filled up the space between the tunnel and the arch bridge. Currently, it had nowhere to go but to the dried-up river. At this moment, Duan Lingtian, who was restricted by the flight-prohibiting formation, was standing firmly on the ground of the dried-up river. He could feel the tremors under his feet was even more terrifying than the one earlier. The seemingly endless milky white force swept in his direction, wave by wave. Each wave was stronger than the previous one. The wave of milky white force now was a lot stronger than when it rained down like a waterfall on Duan Lingtian earlier. When Duan Lingtian sensed the aura of this force, Duan Lingtian could not help but feel horrified because the force was so powerful he was uncertain if the colossal sword bell that he consolidated using his sun true origin would be able to withstand it. If he was in his real body, he might be able to rely on his body's brute strength. However, he could only rely on his clone whose brute strength was nowhere as strong as his real body. At this moment, he could only rely on his sun true origin. I can't be swept away by this force. Otherwise, I'll definitely die. When Duan Lingtian thought of this, he did not dare to stay still, he quickly ran toward the other side of the river instead. Boom! Just as Duan Lingtian ran out, waves by waves, the milky white force closest to him finally swept out like a flood and crashed violently on the dried-up river. When the first wave crashed down, waves upon waves of the milky white force crashed down as well. In just a blink of an eye, half of the river was already filled with the milky white force. After it was filled, the milky white force continued to sweep out to the other side of the river as though it would never stop until it completely filled the entire place. The wave of milky white force at the front was pushed by the waves of force behind it, increasing its speed. In just a while, its speed had surpassed Duan Lingtian's speed. The gap between them began to turn narrower. Damn it! Even without turning his head around, Duan Lingtian could sense the force behind was fast approaching him. He was momentarily horrified. If this was a normal situation, he would find the distance of the riverbank ahead of him to be near. However, it felt extremely far at this moment. The saying, "one's heart is burning with anxiety," perfectly described Duan Lingtian's current feeling. Boom, 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 comma. The wave of the force at the front picked up its speed and tried to close the distance between it and Duan Lingtian. In the end, it was only a foot away from him. Currently, Duan Lingtian was still quite a distance away from the riverbank. If this went on, he would definitely be drowned by the force behind him before he even reached the riverbank. When the vast force was less than a foot away from Duan Lingtian, it easily destroyed the colossal sword bell Duan Lingtian had activated. "I'll give it a fight." After his colossal sword bell crumbled, Duan Lingtian realized the precarious situation he was in. His handsome face had a solemn expression as the sun true origin in his body whirled and swept out at its fastest speed ever through the 99 saint veins. 10,000 swords territory. At this critical moment, Duan Lingtian consolidated his territory. The moment the 10,000 swords territory appeared, it enveloped the milky white force that was within a 100-meter radius of Duan Lingtian. At the same time, under Duan Lingtian's control, the 10,000 solidified sword rays inside the 10,000 swords territory gathered rapidly and formed a golden gigantic sword that dazzled like the sun. With a raise of his hand, Duan Lingtian took control of the sword, and the remaining sun true origin in his body surged into the gigantic sword in a frenzy. When he saw the wave of milky white force at the forefront was about to swallow him up, he finally made his move during the critical moment. Swish! The gigantic sword in his hand slashed down. Not only did it contain all his current strength, but it also contained the profundity of the sovereign heart sword. Swish! 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 Comma. The gigantic sword slashed across the sky, and the air vibrated. The gigantic sword met with a resistant force from the air because it was slashed down vertically. Despite the resistance from the air, the speed of the gigantic sword did not decrease at all. Finally, the gigantic sword met with force at the forefront that was about to swallow Duan Lingtian up. They clashed violently against one another. At the moment the sword came in contact with that force, Duan Lingtian felt an intense tremor on his hands. Accompanied by the intense pain, a wave of fierce force ran amok in his body like a headless fly, causing his vital energy and blood to surge and resulting in internal injuries. Bang! At the same time, the gigantic sword was finally shattered by that wave of force at the forefront. At the instant the gigantic sword shattered, a wave of powerful force swept out and violently slammed into Duan Lingtian, sending him flying. Duan Lingtian was sent flying like an arrow that had left the bow before crashing dangerously on the riverbank. Crash! When Duan Lingtian crashed on the riverbank, the wave of force at the forefront also crashed against the riverbank, causing a loud sound that sounded like the roar of an angry dragon.